I'm a guy. I open my heart.
You're not sure that your family with that. You just want to pack up and
we gotta cut the internet off. We can't allow this to happen.
I'm Nicole DePaul. In 2009, we tried to adopt Natalia. It fell apart. That was heartbreaking. I loved her like she was my daughter. I still do. But then Natalia's boyfriend, Neil, said the Manses are keeping her like a prisoner. I have no choice but to help.
But it could go totally sideways.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to see you. My dad is going to snap.
You're not gonna get away with it.
It's still super dangerous.
Were you ever beaten or physically abused by Cynthia or Antoine?
I don't want to talk about that.
I used to get beat on all the time.
I kept telling her, you need to go before you get killed.
All of a sudden, there's like this 180. What's going on? What are you hiding? I just want to recut.
The Mans are supposed to be this God-fearing people that love kids, and it's actually, they're abusers.
Vince and I are watching these videos, and there are many stories about Cynthia and Antoine abusing Natalia and other kids too. And Natalia is refusing to watch them. She locks herself in the bedroom. It seems like there is something she doesn't want us to know. Something she's hiding.
They were very violent. And Cynthia was slapping Natalia in the face.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. I mean, that's really sad, appalling, and sickening. That's horrible.
We knew there were like really shady things going on, but to this extent, my mind did not go there. But I'm still in shock.
I actually know little people that have been paralyzed by getting slapped. You know, they have cord compression and their parent spanks them or slaps them and then they're paralyzed. And so she's lucky something like that didn't happen.
I mean, it makes me wonder why, maybe this is why Natalia couldn't just up and leave on her own. She was afraid.
Yeah.
These people that take in kids, what? They shouldn't be around kids at all. They should be in jail. However, I mean, her past is such a mystery that really, we don't know what she went through. She's always going to be living with the results of trauma. And I've been trying to get her to go to therapy multiple times, but she refuses to go to therapy. If somebody doesn't want to help themselves, you can't really force them. So I'm not sure how this is going to play out, honestly.
Whatever is said in the videos and everything, I'm going to just let you know what really happened.
After the film grew up, the videos were barely finished. Natalia pops out and immediately she starts asking what was on the video, who was on it, you know, what were they saying. It's strange that she could have watched these videos herself and instead she just waits till we watch them and then interrogates us about all what was on the videos.
The kid said that Cynthia would slap you open here, straight across the face. Did Cynthia slap you?
And so,
while we were trying to explain what we watched, before we could even finish the sentences to explain it to her, she immediately shut it down. They're lying. They're lying. Nope, they're lying. All that is lying. I was barely even hearing the whole story. It was definitely a premeditated denial. It was just like, it was all queued up and ready to go.
Guy with the little boy, he has a vendetta because we wouldn't babysit for him anymore because he wouldn't pay us.
But the kid, though. What about the kid? He's lying too?
That's his dad telling him to say that. That was all that. Like, case closed.
It's pretty hypocritical for Natalia to refer to the little boy as a liar, even though she didn't even see the video. And pretty much treating him like people were treating her. Everybody thought she was this creepy murderer orphan and vilifying her without knowing the information. A lot of people saying the same things. I don't think they're all lying. Many people think Cynthia and Antoine beat on Natalia. A lot of people are saying a belt. A lot of people are saying bare butt. A lot of people are saying that they got whooped. That's a lot of the same corroboration. There's no way it's made up.
There's something really strange going on here. Is Natalia trying to help cover up something, and if so, why? We know social services came to the Manders home several times, but there were never any charges filed. That makes me wonder if Natalia also denied the abuse years ago during those investigations.
Natalia denied all of Cynthia and Antoine's abuse was weird. And then I had to remind myself, well, this is somebody that's been through a lot of trauma.
Come in. Hi. What's up?
We just wanted to check on you. We wanted to make sure everything's okay, if you feel comfortable and anything. I want you to know that if you need anything, we're here for you. And if you have a problem or you have a question or you have anything, you can come to me. And if you just want me to listen, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'll have to, like, work on that because, like, normally I don't really like talking to people about my problems.
Yeah, I get it. You've had a lot in the past, so, you know, that happens when you have trauma. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just going to take a little time.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot. It's a big change.
Yeah, it is.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a safe space. I want you to feel safe, and I just want you to feel comfortable.
Thanks. I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah. You can come to us about anything, you know. Girl stuff, boy stuff, you know. Embarrassing stuff. If it's too embarrassing for me, you can go to Mackenzie. Just don't be shy.
I won't.
Okay, good. For Natalia to be able to trust me, I know that it's going to take time. Right now, I think she just needs, like, some fun.
Whoa, nice!
I'm Mackenzie DePaul. I'm getting to know Natalia. It's really fun. It's like having a sister. Oh my god! She's really excited, I think, to go out and do stuff, but she's telling me that she never got to really do anything.
Oh, let's do this.
We're going to the mall, the arcade, we're shopping, we're getting new clothes. It feels good to be able to explore different things, and we be goofy a lot, and we laugh a lot. Come on, do it! Oh, you got you! Mackenzie is pretty much like my best friend. Like, we click easily. It was almost like a long-lost sister type of deal. Oh my god!
Little by little, Natalia started to, like, trust me a little bit more, and I'm starting to realize that actually there's two different Natalias. There's public Natalia and private Natalia. Public Natalia says nice things about the Manders. I love my parents, I love my family, I love God. And private Natalia says terrible things about the Manders. It's going to stay down like the third look. Next slide. Small. So basically Natalia's story changes depending on who's around.
Were you or any of the kids ever beaten or physically abused by Cynthia or Antoine?
I don't want to talk about that. No.
So, like, the film crew's there, it's a pop on the butt.
Were you ever hit?
Not anything crazy, like maybe a little pop on the butt or something.
But actually, every now and then she'll drop little tidbits about the abuse that went on in the Manders. Natalia has admitted to me firsthand that she has been whooped by both Cynthia and Antoine. Whooping is like a beating. Like how Natalia explained it, it's like, I mean, where you're whooping somebody, and then when she said that they cry in tears. They scream and yell and cry, and it hurts and it hurts and it hurts.
She did mention whooping, like scared of Antoine type whooping. It's really, because, I mean, something's not right. Like, personally, what they did to her was a crime in itself. Hitting anybody with a disability is already messed up, let alone a child, let alone somebody with such severe dwarfism.
We have house cams all over my house. Mostly we put them in for security. Natalia is very much aware. She actually helped me set up the security cameras because she's very tech savvy. In fact, Natalia is so well aware of the cameras being there that she will walk away from the cameras when she does not want to be recorded. So these house cams, they wind up catching Natalia being truthful about Antoine and Cynthia.
I think like maybe you should talk to someone about some of the stuff, you know? I mean, some of it was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Especially from Antoine. Do you understand what I'm saying?
At first I thought Natalia was brainwashed. But then we hear her talking to Neil, saying, bad-mouthing the Manses. So I'm starting to realize that Natalia is not brainwashed by Cynthia and Antoine. The truth is, I think she's being blackmailed by them. Natalia is lying on camera because they have dirt on her.
Let's take a look at Nicole's theory here. Remember that phone call when Cynthia and Antoine accused Natalia of doing other things?
She's done other things too. But this was a new low. There has been a lot of things that Natalia has done.
So what are they talking about? We don't know. But Cynthia and Antoine did find out that Natalia was communicating with Neil. And there were a lot of messages between Natalia and Neil, which Cynthia and Antoine took from Natalia. Now, at first they said they deleted them.
From the guys, they're deleted. She doesn't even have Facebook no more. She deleted it. Yeah.
Oh.
But Neil told us that Cynthia and Antoine still have those messages. So what could be in those messages that has Natalia so scared?
I don't know specifically what Cynthia and Antoine are using to blackmail Natalia, but it's got to be something sexual. Let me just tell you what happened. So a few days ago, walking down my hall to go to the bathroom, and I hear like moaning, like a porno. And I'm like, I mean, my husband has a den downstairs with a TV. So I thought like maybe he put like X-rated TV on or something, and I was about to bang on the floor and say like, haha, you're being obvious, But then I realized it's not his TV. It was actually coming from Natalia's room. It was like moaning. And not only was she moaning, but she was saying Neil's name. So I could only deduce that they were having video sex or phone sex. We got these panels to soundproof Natalia's room. And I don't care, like, just go girl, whatever. It was actually funny, we made a joke about it. It's a small house with many walls. But who cares about phone sex? Like, there's nothing bad about it. They're two consenting adults, who cares? The reason I even brought up the phone sex to begin with is because if she's having these sexual relationships and sexual videos at my house in a very loud manner. By the way, I'm partially deaf, so that will tell you how loud it is, and I had no problem hearing it. And if she's doing that at my house, I'm betting she probably did that at the Manses too, with him. And then also, Natalia told me that when she was 18, she was online and she had like a short relationship with a Middle Eastern gentleman. She told me, I think I made a mistake because I sent images I shouldn't have sent, like sexual images, sexual messages that could be embarrassing to her. The Manses, they found out. and they took her computer, and so now we have a pattern. Neil told me Cynthia and Antoine took all the private things that Neil and Natalia talked about. Sexual stuff, comments, sexual pictures, I believe. All of this stuff they have that they're just basically holding over her head, like, in my opinion, blackmailing her. Like, if you dare say anything, if you tell the truth about how you're abusive, if you tell anything negative, they will then release all the sexual images, all the sexual messages. And you know what? It's working because she's terrified.
I won't trust anybody.
Natalia believes that if anybody talks negatively about the managers, like I do, or that little boy,
the censor will slap Natalia in the face.
or anybody,
I thought Antoine beat Natalia.
she's going to somehow get the blame for that. And then the blame is not just blame, then it's blackmail. And then it includes Neil. And they are like loaded and prepared to release any information they have.
I'm worried because I feel like with those videos, murders are.
So you're saying, like, if they put those videos out, they can start a whole war.
And nothing else is going to come out. They're going to talk. I feel like that's what's going to happen. And it hurts because I never thought in my entire life that they would try to do that to me. Yeah. But I'm really, really certain that they will. I'm worried about my relationship with Neil. I want to just live my life. I want to be with the person that I love. And I feel like that they are really going to put some out there. Because they can slander Neil, they can slander our relationship. And then I'm not going to be able to live my life the way I want. I'm not going to be able to be with him the way I want to be. It's just going to be all over. I feel like they're going to start. And it's going to be literal hell.
It seems like Natalia will do anything to make sure that Antoine and Cynthia are not going to turn against her, are not going to say anything bad about her, reveal her secrets. She doesn't want to hurt them, but she's also fearful of them because they know something, apparently, that she does not want revealed. But what's even more startling is that they start to bring in other members of their family to harass Natalia and Neil. And this is where things get really ugly.
Natalia told me that Natalia's sister keeps asking for money from Natalia. This older sister has sexual pictures of Natalia and Neil and are holding that over her head for money. Otherwise, she'll release them to the internet. I don't know. And this girl was messaging Neil horrible messages like you're a pervert, you're a pedophile, you're fat, you're bald. And when Natalia asked her, well, I'm not, why would I send you money? You called my boyfriend all these horrible names. Natalia's sister said, well, actually, I just did it for mom, so mom didn't have to do it. So she did Cynthia's dirty work. And Natalia's sending her money on Cash App. I thought that once Natalia was out of the manager's house, we might be rid of the managers, but even though Natalia is living under my roof, they're exploiting her and they're still controlling her.
The managers are holding on to a significant amount of money that is Natalia's, that is amassed over time and things from public appearances. And Natalia is letting Cynthia continue to be her payee. So all told, it's estimated to be over $200,000. That's money that could go to helping Natalia. Except now, a large chunk of it went instead to buying the managers a trailer in Tennessee. Natalia should push for her money. She should say, give me my money. I want my money. Maybe Natalia, has some medical stuff she could use it for. Like, what is going on here?
A few weeks go by and it gets even worse. She's like constantly on the phone with Cynthia and Angela. I heard this conversation. She talked to the managers and asked, if she was going to get any portion of the money. The managers asked Natalia, what do you think is fair?
we got savings still. So if we had extra bunch up in the house, we still got money that we've been saving for a while. Yeah, what are you thinking?
What about just the 25,000?
That's fine with me.
Yeah, because that's cool.
They quickly agreed to that amount, which made me think that there's a lot more money going on here.
You would. I'll text you an email, and you can send me like an official confirmation receipt email.
Oh, yeah. So in that way, if ever one day we do sell our house, they know that we already settled on this agreement.
Exactly.
She signed it, and she emailed it back, and it basically said that she has no right to their house, even though they bought their house with Natalia's money. And she needs that money for surgery, so that's like disgusting.
You stay my page.
Who stay your page?
You've been my page for over 11 years almost, so I can't trust you.
Yeah, let's just keep it the way it is, and we'll just do what we've been doing.
One thing I will say, as far as this whole thing goes, Natalia, you made a decision because you want to be with this guy. That's why you did it.
Okay.
And we should just leave it where it's at.
My request is, we ain't saying nothing about him. You make sure you don't go in there and say nothing about us.
It sure seems to me that the man's apparent blackmail scheme worked. And that's why it also seems like, in my opinion, they're extorting Natalia.
And that's why she's fearful that if it gets out, it will ruin her relationship with Neil. Maybe Natalia was so terrified that she chose Cynthia and Antoine's side over Nicole.
Love you guys.
Love you too. Love you. We'll talk to you later.
When I found out that the Manses have some sort of deal between Natalia and Neil, you know, like some kind of pact, it felt awful. And it felt like a betrayal. I mean, it's devastating. I mean, I tried so hard, rescued her from a very dangerous situation, and got her from another state, drove her hours, tried to take care of her. We're the only ones at all these families that try to do right by her. So yeah, I'm so pissed. This is just absolute insane. Now I feel like, you know, there's a war going on in my house. I tried so hard to protect Natalia from Cynthia and Antoine, but then, you know, she turned on me. Like, I remember when I confronted Natalia about why all of a sudden the switch. Now all of a sudden there's like this 180. What's going on? What are you hiding? Why are you protecting them? I'm just so used to it. Why are you looking at me like that? All of a sudden, when she asked the cameras to be off, she turned around and her face just like shot like daggers through me, and it was just kind of creepy and scary, like, honestly. Like, I was taken back, like, it was a whole other person, really. In that moment, when I confronted Natalia on camera, I witnessed that weird, like, switch in behavior. Why are you looking at me like that? It's just between us. Me, you, my parents, you know? And then the cameras turned off, and she said straight to me, "You crossed a line." Like, I mean, she was pissed. And the situation just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Because a week or two after that, I started to realize that Cynthia and Antoine are controlling Natalia in my house. And now they're trying to control me too. Recently, I started to notice Natalia would come out and, like, suspiciously put her phone down, upside down, and then ask me questions. Like, what have you been saying on camera? And to me, it was obvious that somebody was either listening or she was recording. So now she's choosing Cynthia and Antoine over our family. So basically, Natalia starts this all-out campaign to silence me about talking about Cynthia and Antoine. So I added even more cameras to my kitchen. I added cameras to my family room. Sometimes I feel like a stranger in my own house. And it's not easy on Vince, and it's not easy on Mackenzie. Now my body has caused this weird friction divide in my family. I don't feel comfortable being spied on in my own house. Like, this is a terrible feeling.
According to Nicole, Natalia was walking around the house with her phone, recording the conversations. Now, here's my take on this. I think Natalia is letting Cynthia and Antoine eavesdrop on her conversations with Nicole, or she's recording them and sending them back to the Manses so they know what's being said in the house, and to prove that she, Natalia, is not bad-mouthing them or accusing them of any abuse.
Cynthia and Antoine, I want Natalia to know her parents have taken advantage of her from pretty much the beginning. They're frauds, and nobody scares me, especially Cynthia and Antoine. Not going to be quiet. Screw that. Nobody shuts me up. Especially when we're talking about Natalia's safety and the surgeries that she needs. Hello?
Yes, we're here.
Can I ask you a question? If she has to be with this guy, then why did you guys jump all over again?
I never talked to this guy. What are you talking about?
He got all kinds of hateful messages that he was going through. That's not true. That he was a pedophile.
This is a pedophile? Do that. I don't do that.
Nobody ever said he was a pedophile.
Come on, Nicole. You got to stop trying to pin our daughter against us.
Wait, I didn't say he was in hot spaces for you, though, Nicole.
Said about her 11 years. Her ID has been expired for 8 years.
Oh, because Natalia's not your child, Nicole.
Well, I'm in my bedroom with my boyfriend, and we heard Cynthia we could tell it was her on the phone. I think she was on speaker. I remember I came out of my room, and then I had my phone, and I started recording.
Are you going to buy her a house with that money you guys collected? All that money you guys collected? Give me a break.
You don't need to worry about our finances, Nicole. I just told you.
Stop interrupting me, please. You're going to use some of those funds that you got from fundraising to buy her a house?
That's none of your business.
Yeah, because the answer is no. Every time I ask you a question you don't want to answer, you say it's none of your business.
It's none of your business. That is not your daughter. That is mine. I don't want to. You don't have no business layering that.
But I'm trying to help you help your daughter. Don't you want that?
It's none of your business.
It is my business. Excuse me, but you guys literally put me inside your business when Natalia begged me to come pick her up. So it is now my business. Going forward, Cynthia, you listen and respect her as an adult. She's not a child.
We have carried her for 11 years.
Yeah, and you've also received Social Security income for her and 11 other kids. Yeah.
That's a lie.
Good job. Good job. And good job for taking care of her. And good job for getting her medical care and all of her school, her driver's license.
I'm in my room.
In my house, Cynthia. You can't tell me what to do in my house, okay?
That little girl sitting right there in that house is my daughter.
Okay. She's going to be paralyzed. She's going to be paralyzed if she doesn't have surgery. Do you care?
She's not. I rebuke your plan, Satan.
Okay. No, I won't shut up. Because your lack of intelligence is going to lead to her paralyzation. You understand that?
My daughter ain't never going to be paralyzed.
Yeah, okay.
God has her.
Right. So God didn't have me? So God didn't have me when I was paralyzed?
Paralyzed? Are you paralyzed?
I was becoming paralyzed before I had surgery.
You live a sinful life. Because that's
I live a sinful life? Cynthia had the audacity to basically say, oh, well, you deserve to have pain. You deserve to have your back not fixed. She goes, well, I don't know. Maybe it's because you're a sinner. And how dare she? God's punishing me. and we're better than you. We pray, and we can pray away our pain. I mean, you.
So you think that I could have just prayed away my paralysis?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You're delusional. You cannot just pray away this kind of condition.
Yeah, you can. My God is a God of miracles.
I mean, you obviously don't care. You don't care. I mean, I tried to set you up with Dr. Feldman. Why wouldn't you take that?
Because that's Satan. You try to
That's Satan.
fear to somebody and listen.
Oh my God.
God, you don't fear nobody but God.
Don't you push my daughter to get that surgery. And Natalia could die. I rebuke you in Jesus' name. Excuse me? I rebuke you in the mighty name of Jesus Christ.
Cynthia's just screaming at my mom, this woman who has the same dwarfism, saying, you know, she needs medical help. And instead of saying, like, okay, like, you're right, because my mom was right, she said, I rebuke you, Satan. Like, I don't understand. In the time that I've had 13 surgeries, Natalia has had none. She's always, like, scrunched up because her back and legs hurt her. She needs surgery.
Can you step over me, please?
We let you talk. I know you didn't. All I'm saying is we've taken her to a lot of specialists.
But I want to know the doctors. We need to know our daughter's doctor. You are you. Paralyzed, and you don't even care. They do care.
It's hurtful that Nat didn't defend my mom because it's my mom. And my mom's just been trying to help her the whole time, but Natalia always defends Cynthia no matter what she does. And in response, my mom just screamed that.
You build the narrative as if we did not take care of our daughter. You know what my narrative is? I don't want Natalia to become paralyzed. I don't want you information, and I know what to talk to you.
Every time I tried to talk, they just screamed over me. And I said, I'm trying to pass on information that's going to help your daughter. I want Natalia to know that there's help for her, that she can't be seen and checked. And every time I do that, they interrupt me, they scream over me, they call me a sinner.
That devil is a liar. That's a rat. And I refuse to deal with that.
They call me the devil. I'm the devil.
You reap what you sow.
And so do you. Listen to me. They try to make it seem like we're neglectful parents, Nicole. That's because you guys are going to the wrong doctors.
That's your opinion. You're not.
It is not. That is not my opinion.
It's not Antoine, it's Bishop.
Natalia. The doctor in. Can I just finish, please, Cynthia? I want to talk to my daughter. I've talked to her long enough. We still told Natalia that if it comes to a point and she wants to come home, she's welcome. Natalia Grace Renee Mans knows the truth.
Right.
We good.
Every time I say hi, you text me, Natalia, when she gets away from you, baby, call me back or you just put me on hold till she walks away.
Hi.
I can't handle all this stuff. I want to get a hotel.
Okay.
And so my dad can go get me or
We don't want any more drama. Natalia is stressed out. And if she wants to come home and we're going to, take her and help her and just go from there.
How are you going to get to a hotel? Nicole can't drive.
they were going to get me an Uber.
Today, things kind of hit the fan. I'm pretty upset because all of a sudden, Natalia's leaving today. I just believe that her parents have such control over her that now all of a sudden she wants to go back. And, now she's backpedaling on everything that she had said. Anytime she's around Antoine and Cynthia, it's like they have this bit of rolling her.
It's just sad. I feel so sad for her, honestly. I feel so sad.
It's amazing that Natalia is creating all of this drama and chaos in yet another household. It's a pattern I call the hell loop. It happened with the Chiccones, and then with the Barnetts, and then the Mandas, and now it looks like it's happening with the DePauls. Will Natalia eventually move on to another family and then another family, or will the DePauls find the harmony in their household that Natalia needs and break this curse?
Now Natalia wants to go back to the Mandas. You know, she said she didn't want to stay at the house. She wanted to go stay at a hotel. Meanwhile, she's kind of holed up in her bedroom. And hours passed. And then I walk down the hall, and I hear Neil on the phone and his accent. And I hear him yelling at her, saying, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? You're going to go back to live with them, blah, 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 blah." And then she comes out and says, with a big smile on her face, "Oh no, I'm staying." And so he, I think, was the one who changed her mind. So Natalia has decided to stay with us, but it's been incredibly difficult to have our previously happy home just in shambles. Like, I'm so torn because I don't want her to go back to the Mandas because they're abusive, but I also don't want her to tear up my family. Like, I'm really conflicted right now. What the hell did I get myself into? Before Natalia moved in, Mackenzie and I were close and always talking. Now that Natalia is at the house, I definitely see Mackenzie a lot less. Besides that, you're busy with school and everything. What is it keeping you away from home, really? Like, you know.
You've always been a great advocate for me and protected me, and I know you have a heart of gold and wanted to do the same for Natalia. But she makes the environment kind of stressful, and now it just feels like there's just always some kind of drama.
You know, honestly, sometimes I feel guilty because I'm the one who brought this on us. You know, I'm the one who jumped on it. I feel bad, and I hope this doesn't cause, you know, problems within our relationship.
Bringing Natalia to our house is a crazy decision, and it's had consequences. It just sucks that everything is so complicated.
Yeah. Before Natalia got here, it was peaceful, completely peaceful. We really didn't have a lot of drama. No drama. I mean, we don't even yell really in our house. Once Natalia got into the scene, it was like, it's just chaotic and tumultuous, and just, if you really want me to be honest, it's like somebody's put a bomb into my house. Like, I can't win, you know? There's no doubt that my relationship between my daughter and I has been affected and impacted negatively. There's no doubt. Mackenzie doesn't want to come home.
I know we all want the best for Natalia, but, you know, I really don't want her to drive a wedge between us.
Yeah.
We need to protect our family. I don't want to see this situation cause issues with, like, between you and Dad, or just, like, affect us as a family.
It's not true. And Vince thinks it's a show. Vince is definitely having regrets.
My mom prioritized saving Natalia over her marriage. The whole situation has definitely caused some stress between my parents.
It's true. Vince and I have friction on how to deal with Natalia. every single day. Because when I first, got home and, the fighting started with, the Manses and stuff, he's never said this to me before, ever, in our relationship, but he said, I gotta tell you, Nick, I'm thinking of leaving and, never coming back. Because he didn't listen to me when I said, I didn't really want this to happen. So, we've been married for 23 years, and we've been together for 34 years, and that's never ever something like that. And he's like, oh, this is exactly what I was afraid of. I'm sorry, all I can say is I'm sorry. But then, to add insult to injury, she turns on me and makes my household just completely chaotic. And it's just sad. It's really sad.
The sun had already set over the quiet suburban streets of Clearwater, Florida, when the first screams tore through the air, sharp and desperate, slicing the humid night like a knife. It was April 12th, 2010, and the neighborhood had been serene moments before, the kind of calm that lulls residents into a false sense of safety. But that evening, the sound of terror echoed from a modest single-story house at the corner of Maplewood Avenue, the kind of home that looked normal from the outside: white picket fence, manicured lawn, wind chimes swaying gently in the breeze. Inside, everything was chaos. Furniture overturned, pictures ripped from the walls, a broken lamp scattered shards of glass across the living room floor. In the middle of it all, a young woman, just 22, lay unconscious, bruises forming dark purple halos around her eyes, one hand clutching a phone that had been dropped mid-call. Her name was Jessica Harper, and that night would mark the beginning of a story that would haunt this community for a decade. Police were on the scene within minutes, sirens screaming, lights flashing, officers sprinting up the driveway, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. Jessica was rushed to St. Anthony's Hospital, where doctors worked frantically to stabilize her. But she could say little. Her memory of the event was fragmented, like shards of broken glass she could barely grasp. Investigators combed through the house, noting every anomaly: a faint smear of blood near the kitchen counter, a window forced open in the back, muddy footprints leading from the sliding door to the street, vanishing as suddenly as they appeared. Nothing concrete. No fingerprints on the glass, no DNA under her fingernails. Whoever had done this had planned meticulously, left almost no trace. Neighbors were shaken. Mrs. Delaney from 2 doors down reported hearing a car engine, a low hum, a vehicle idling too long in the driveway, but by the time she looked outside, it was gone. The silence returned. Children who had been playing hopscotch on the sidewalk now peeked nervously from behind curtains, whispers traveling quickly, feeding rumors that spread faster than the police could control. Who would do this? Who would invade a home so casually, so violently, and vanish into the night without a single clue? Detective Mark Reynolds, a seasoned investigator with over 20 years on the force, arrived on the scene. His jaw was tight, eyes scanning every detail, instincts honed from years of working the worst of Clearwater's crimes. He crouched near the broken lamp, picking up shards with a gloved hand, noting a thin smear of blood on the edge that suggested it had been wiped in a hurry. Nothing else. No signs of forced entry besides the window. "It's clean," he muttered under his breath, a statement more of frustration than observation. Too clean. For weeks, the investigation yielded little. Jessica's recollection was hazy at best, flashes of shadowy figures, a voice she couldn't place, the smell of something chemical, metallic, that made her stomach turn. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, interviewed dozens, gathered alibis, examined surveillance footage from nearby streets. Nothing. the trail went cold. The case was logged quietly into the archives of unsolved crimes, labeled a cold case, one of the many that would sit, untouched, while the world moved on. But for Jessica, nothing moved on. She would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the echo of footsteps in her hallways, the phantom presence of someone still watching. Friends tried to comfort her, neighbors shook their heads, offering half-hearted reassurances, but there was no escaping the weight of the unknown. The uncertainty gnawed at her, at the community, leaving a lingering fear that anyone could be next. Months turned into years. Police periodically reopened the case, hoping for a lead. DNA technology advanced. Fingerprints were cross-checked against new databases. Tips came in, some credible, most not, but none led to an arrest. The neighborhood slowly adjusted to a new normal, but the whispers never ceased. "Do you remember that girl?" They would ask in grocery stores, at soccer games, in the aisles of the local pharmacy. Every April, a candle flickered in a window for Jessica, a silent acknowledgement that the terror of that night had not been forgotten. Then came the anomalies. Small, seemingly inconsequential details overlooked in the initial investigation. A receipt found tucked under a floorboard during a later sweep, dated the night of the attack, from a convenience store just a mile away. Surveillance footage from that store revealed a car parked out front for an unusually long period. The angle was poor, the vehicle partially obscured, the license plate unreadable, but it was something, a thread, a whisper of movement in an otherwise frozen case. Detective Reynolds, now obsessed with what had become a personal vendetta against the void of answers, ordered every detail re-examined, every witness re-interviewed, every report cross-referenced with every new lead. Community forums online buzzed with speculation. Amateur sleuths, true crime bloggers, self-proclaimed experts pored over the known facts. Some suggested a transient, others a local resident with a grudge. Theories multiplied: revenge, robbery, a random act of violence. Jessica herself became a reluctant figure in these discussions, reading threads late at night, each new post a mix of hope and horror. And through it all, the unknown perpetrator remained a ghost, untouchable, silent, leaving only the scars of fear behind. Then, in the 4th year, a break emerged. An anonymous tip called the Clearwater Police Department, referencing a man who had moved out of state shortly after 2010. The tipster provided a name, a vague description, a possible motive, linking the individual to a previous minor offense, but nothing concrete. The information was tantalizing yet frustratingly incomplete. Detective Reynolds tracked down the man, questioned neighbors, friends, former coworkers. Everyone remembered him as quiet, unassuming, the kind of person who blends into the background. No one suspected he could harbor such darkness. It was the digital trail, subtle and easily overlooked, that began to unravel the case. Emails sent from a temporary address, deleted quickly, messages referencing the date of the attack, cryptic notes of satisfaction, of control, of watching. Pieced together, they revealed a pattern, small but persistent, an obsession with dominance, secrecy, the thrill of invisibility. Detective Reynolds spent nights in front of multiple monitors, mapping out the digital footprint, cross-referencing with the original evidence. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, not of randomness, but of intent. Jessica, meanwhile, continued her struggle, both internal and external. Counseling sessions, support groups, late-night drives to clear her head, each attempt at normalcy underscored the depth of trauma left behind. Yet, she refused to disappear into anonymity, speaking to local newspapers, advocating for cold case awareness, keeping the story alive, refusing to let the perpetrator vanish into obscurity. Her courage was quiet but persistent, a flicker in the darkness. The community, initially paralyzed by fear, now watched with cautious hope. Each new detail, each investigative breakthrough, reignited conversations, anxiety tempered by anticipation. And through it all, the city of Clearwater carried the shadow of that night, the broken lamp, the window forced open, the footprints in the mud, the echo of screams that would never truly fade. Detective Reynolds, older now, more determined than ever, understood that closure was not merely about arresting a suspect. It was about reclaiming the narrative, restoring the sense of safety that had been shattered. But the case was far from over. The threads were thin, the connections fragile, and one wrong move could send the investigation spiraling back into silence. Every lead demanded scrutiny, every assumption challenged. The unknown perpetrator had been careful, meticulous, intelligent, and the years of evasion had only honed their methods. The detective and his team worked tirelessly, the clock ticking, the pressure mounting, the weight of expectation from a community desperate for answers pressing down on them like a physical force. And so the story of Jessica Harper, of a home shattered, of a community gripped by fear, continued. Each new clue, each painstaking analysis, each sleepless night in the pursuit of truth was a step closer to resolution, yet also a reminder of how long darkness could persist when left unchecked. The cold case of 2010 was not just a file in an archive, it was a living, breathing entity, haunting every corner of Clearwater, shaping conversations, altering perceptions, and keeping the past painfully present. The tip led them to Jacksonville, a city of sprawling neighborhoods and endless highways, the kind of place where a person can vanish into the crowd with ease. Detective Reynolds flew in without hesitation, carrying with him every shred of evidence collected over the years, every note, every photograph, every digital footprint meticulously compiled into a dossier that now weighed heavily under his arm. He parked near the suspect's last known address, a modest apartment complex tucked between a laundromat and a shuttered diner. The walls of the building were cracked, paint peeling, a forgotten corner of the city that mirrored the neglect of countless lives passing through it. Inside, Reynolds found subtle signs that confirmed his suspicions: mails stacked in corners, a half-empty refrigerator, a calendar with dates circled, not in any discernible pattern, but almost ritualistic, deliberate. He moved carefully, documenting everything, knowing that the smallest detail could unravel years of silence. Photographs on the wall were nondescript, faces blurred or partially obscured, yet one image, a snapshot of a deserted park bench at dusk, caught his attention. He recognized it instantly. It was near Jessica's neighborhood, the same park where she sometimes walked after work, the same bench where she had waited for her ride the night of the attack. Every step taken in that apartment was like walking through the mind of someone calculating, someone methodical. The air smelled faintly of chemicals, industrial, antiseptic, as if someone had attempted to sanitize memories that should have never existed. Detective Reynolds took photographs, collected samples, every movement deliberate, precise, like the unfolding of a long-hidden narrative. This was more than an apartment. It was a shrine of obsession, a testament to a mind consumed by secrecy and control. Meanwhile, back in Clearwater, Jessica Harper continued her quiet vigil over the case. Each new lead was both a beacon and a torment, reigniting memories she had struggled to suppress. Flashbacks would hit without warning, the way the floor had felt beneath her palms, the metallic tang in her mouth, the shadow crossing the living room as the intruder moved with chilling precision. She kept a journal, documenting each moment, each detail, hoping that her recollections could aid the investigation. Her resilience was quiet but unwavering. Every word written was a defiance against the fear that had tried to consume her. Detective Reynolds traced the digital threads further. Encrypted emails, anonymous chat logs, a series of false identities used over years, all converging to a single, untraceable entity. But patterns emerged, tiny inconsistencies, errors the perpetrator had thought inconsequential, revealing more than intended. Reynolds mapped out movements, correlated them with local events, cross-referenced purchases, public records, and social media activity. Slowly, the puzzle began to take shape, an outline of a life carefully hidden but never entirely erased. Interviews with acquaintances painted a portrait both ordinary and terrifying. The suspect was polite, quiet, unremarkable in appearance, exactly the kind of person one would never suspect. Yet those who knew him hinted at a darker side, subtle and easily dismissed. A fascination with crime documentaries, obsessive attention to detail, a tendency to linger in places longer than socially acceptable, and almost predatory patience. It was the patience that haunted Reynolds the most, the same patience that had allowed the attack on Jessica to remain unsolved for so long. In Jacksonville, surveillance footage was scrutinized frame by frame. Shadows moving through empty streets, fleeting glimpses of a figure entering convenience stores late at night, the same vehicle appearing in multiple locations without pattern, yet each moment carrying a trace of intent, a signature. Forensics teams analyzed tire treads, shoe prints, traces of fabric, minute fibers that might otherwise go unnoticed. Every piece, no matter how small, became a thread, a potential link in a chain long thought broken. As the investigation deepened, Reynolds found himself questioning more than just the facts. He questioned the psychology behind the act, the driving force that led someone to plan and execute a violent invasion of privacy, a violation of trust so intimate it left permanent scars. Experts were consulted, behavioral analysts brought in to interpret subtle patterns, the timing, the choice of location, the method of entry, the absence of overt theft. The conclusion was chilling. This was not a robbery, not a crime of opportunity. This was calculated, deliberate, a statement of control and dominance, executed with meticulous attention to detail. Meanwhile, Jessica's presence loomed over the investigation. She met with detectives regularly, recounting details with painstaking precision, reconstructing moments from fragmented memories. Each session yielded new insights, small gestures, subtle inconsistencies in time, fleeting impressions of the intruder's voice and movement. Psychologists guided her through trauma, helping her process, yet every revelation brought both closure and renewed anxiety. The balance between progress and fear was delicate. One misstep could re-traumatize her entirely. The community in Clearwater, years removed from the initial attack, followed developments with a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope. Local news outlets ran headlines about the reopening of the case, the breakthrough in Jacksonville, the possibility that the long-standing mystery might finally be resolved. Residents who had once whispered in hushed tones now spoke openly, sharing recollections, suspicions, and lingering fears. The air of unease that had settled over the neighborhood since 2010 had not dissipated. It had only changed form, evolving into a collective anticipation, a tense waiting for justice long delayed. Detective Reynolds coordinated with multiple law enforcement agencies, state and federal, to track the suspect's movements. Phone records, credit card transactions, vehicle registrations, each provided another layer, another piece of the intricate web. Analysts worked tirelessly, cross-referencing every detail with national databases, seeking the smallest connection that could tie the suspect to the original crime. It was painstaking, exhausting work, requiring not just skill but relentless persistence. Finally, in a quiet moment, Reynolds reviewed the timeline in its entirety. Every movement, every purchase, every intercepted communication was laid out like a map of obsession. Connections emerged where previously there had been only conjecture. The suspect's pattern of avoidance, his choice of residence, his social interactions, even seemingly innocuous online activity, all aligned to a single narrative, a deliberate attempt to evade detection, a careful dance with law enforcement, a mind confident in its ability to remain invisible. Yet confidence is a fragile thing. One misstep, one overlooked detail, could unravel years of careful planning. Reynolds knew this, and he used it to his advantage. Surveillance intensified. Contacts were monitored. Patterns re-examined. The suspect, unaware, continued his daily life, oblivious to the web closing around him, each step drawing him closer to accountability. Jessica, meanwhile, struggled with the psychological weight of the renewed attention. Each breakthrough was a double-edged sword, relief mingled with fear, hope tangled with lingering trauma. Yet she persisted, determined to reclaim the narrative, to participate in the process that had begun nearly a decade earlier. Her courage became a symbol, both for the investigation and for the community that had long suffered in silence. As days turned into nights filled with endless surveillance and analysis, Reynolds and his team felt the momentum shift. The cold case was no longer dormant. It was active, alive with possibility. Every lead reinforced the same conclusion. The suspect had not acted randomly, and the path to resolution, though long and fraught, was finally visible. The tension in the air was palpable, a collective anticipation that could be felt not just in the police station, but in the streets of Clearwater, in the homes of those who had long wondered if justice would ever arrive. And so the investigation pressed on, relentless and consuming, each new discovery a step closer to revelation, each delay a reminder of the time lost, each minor breakthrough a pulse of hope in the otherwise shadowed timeline of a decade-old crime. The story of Jessica Harper, of the quiet streets of Clearwater, of a community held in suspense, continued to unfold, its threads weaving a tense narrative that refused to be ignored. A cold case slowly warming under the scrutiny of relentless pursuit. The breakthrough came quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow slipping through the cracks of a dimly lit room. Detective Reynolds noticed it first, a subtle pattern in the suspect's purchases, small items bought at odd hours, seemingly meaningless. A pack of disposable gloves here, a bottle of cleaning solvent there, a roll of masking tape purchased weeks before a minor renovation. Alone, each detail was trivial. Together, they painted a picture of someone preparing, anticipating, thinking several steps ahead. The realization sent a chill down Reynolds' spine. This wasn't just a criminal who had acted on impulse. This was meticulous, calculating, patient, and still very much capable. Back in Clearwater, Jessica Harper could feel the tension mounting before anyone even spoke of progress. She sensed it in the way law enforcement interacted, the intensity in their eyes, the hushed conversations that seemed to echo with urgency. Her dreams, once fragmented nightmares, now carried vivid images of the intruder, his shadowed figure looming in doorways, the metallic smell of fear, the click of a doorknob twisting in a practiced hand. The passage of time had dulled the edges of memory, but the core terror remained, sharp and unyielding. Reynolds and his team began to focus on digital triangulation, using every modern tool available to trace the suspect's movements over the last decade. Cell tower pings, email IP addresses, social media logins, each byte of data became a thread, connecting places, dates, and people in ways that were previously invisible. Analysts worked around the clock, creating a detailed map of activity, identifying windows of opportunity when the suspect could have struck, patterns that mirrored the night of Jessica's attack. And with each discovery, Reynolds felt the cold grip of anticipation tighten. Justice was near, yet still elusive. The suspect had relocated multiple times, weaving through cities and states with ease, always careful to erase his tracks, to blend into anonymity. But even the most meticulous planning has flaws. Small inconsistencies emerged in surveillance, minor discrepancies in official records, traces left behind in financial statements. These were subtle, almost insignificant on their own, but Reynolds saw the story they told. The suspect's confidence had lulled him into complacency, and complacency is a dangerous vulnerability. Meanwhile, Jessica prepared for the possibility of confrontation. Each phone call from Reynolds, each request for clarification, brought a rush of anxiety tempered by determination. She worked with therapists to process each emotion, each flashback, each lingering fear, understanding that facing the past was an essential part of reclaiming her life. Her resilience became the anchor for the community that had long followed the case, offering silent support and a measure of courage to those who had once whispered fearfully in darkened rooms. In Jacksonville, surveillance intensified. Unmarked vehicles monitored the suspect's daily routines, capturing every movement, every contact, every pattern of life carefully constructed over years. The suspect, oblivious, continued his routines, morning coffee at the same cafe, visits to a local library, short walks along quiet streets. To the outside observer, he was mundane, ordinary, perfectly nondescript. But Reynolds knew better. Each mundane action was a mask, concealing a past filled with violence, a carefully curated facade hiding a dangerous mind. Forensic analysis of evidence collected in previous visits revealed new possibilities. Fibers from the apartment, previously overlooked, were re-examined with advanced techniques. Trace DNA found on items thought to be contaminated or irrelevant now yielded partial matches to national databases. The pieces of the puzzle began to click together in ways that were nearly impossible to ignore. Reynolds cross-referenced this with Jessica's testimony, reconstructing moments from that night with painstaking care, creating a timeline of events precise to the minute. The investigation's momentum began to shift toward urgency. Every lead, no matter how small, was scrutinized. Neighbors who had once dismissed the suspect as quiet and unassuming now reported odd behaviors in retrospect, glances that lingered too long, the sound of someone pacing late at night, cars parked in strange patterns. Reynolds' team aggregated these details, building a profile that was increasingly difficult for law enforcement to ignore. The cold case, dormant for nearly a decade, was heating up with the intensity of a simmering storm. Jessica, while watching progress unfold, felt a mix of hope and dread. Each advance in the investigation reminded her of the fear she had endured, of the helplessness that had followed her like a shadow for years. But she also felt empowerment, a growing sense that her voice mattered, that her recollections could guide justice forward. Each interview, each re-examination of her memories, strengthened the narrative, giving law enforcement the clarity they had long sought. Detective Reynolds coordinated with state and federal agencies, creating a multi-jurisdictional task force. Analysts pored over years of data, cross-referencing travel records, financial transactions, and social activity. Patterns emerged, subtle but undeniable. The suspect had remained within a calculated radius, never straying far from familiar territory, always maintaining connections to places and routines that allowed him to monitor without drawing attention. The meticulousness was chilling, a testament to the careful planning that had kept the case cold for so long. And then came the breakthrough, an overlooked receipt, a time-stamped digital signature on a purchase, a location verified by multiple independent sources. Alone, each was meaningless, easily dismissed as coincidence. Together, they formed a thread impossible to ignore. Reynolds traced the path, confirmed alibis, eliminated inconsistencies, and identified a pattern that pointed directly to the suspect. The pieces aligned in a way that no one could refute. The moment of clarity had arrived, the precipice before action, a tense pause before the storm of accountability would descend. Jessica prepared herself for the inevitable confrontation, rehearsing conversations, bracing for emotions long buried. She understood that justice, when it arrived, could be overwhelming, a tidal wave of sensation she had anticipated for years, but never fully imagined. Her courage was tested in ways that were intimate, raw, and unrelenting, a reflection of the strength required to face the person who had shattered her world. Reynolds and his team planned the arrest meticulously. Unmarked cars, coordinated surveillance, multiple backup teams, all designed to minimize risk and maximize certainty. Timing was critical. Any mistake could allow the suspect to disappear once more, undoing years of painstaking work. The anticipation was almost unbearable, the tension in the room thick, a tangible presence pressing down on every officer, every analyst, every participant in the operation. The suspect moved through his day unaware. Morning routines, habitual stops, casual interactions, all maintained the illusion of normalcy. Reynolds watched through monitors, noting each step, each glance, each minor deviation. The moment to act had to be precise, unflinching, a strike delivered with certainty born of years of preparation. And as the day wore on, the tension escalated, each second stretching into eternity, the silent countdown before justice rang with the weight of years lost, memories scarred, and the enduring hope of closure. The cold case of 2010, once thought dormant, now pulsed with life. Every detail, every lead, every overlooked fragment had converged into a narrative that could not be ignored. The suspect's carefully constructed world was unraveling, thread by thread, under the scrutiny of relentless pursuit. And in Clearwater, Jessica Harper waited, bracing herself for the arrival of truth, the confrontation that would finally force the shadow of the past into the light. Detective Reynolds, weary but resolute, reviewed the plan one last time. Every team member understood their role, every scenario accounted for, contingencies in place for the unexpected. The arrest, when executed, would not just be the apprehension of a suspect, it would be the culmination of a decade-long pursuit, a testament to patience, perseverance, and the refusal to let fear dictate the narrative. And so the day edged forward, each moment taut with tension, every heartbeat echoing the anticipation that had grown steadily over 10 years. The cold case was no longer just a story of fear and uncertainty. It was a story of determination, of justice pursued with dogged precision, and of a community that had endured a decade of suspense, now on the cusp of witnessing the long-awaited reckoning. The morning was humid, thick with the kind of Florida air that clung to the skin and seemed to slow time itself. Detective Reynolds and his team moved silently through the streets of Jacksonville, every step deliberate, every breath measured. The suspect's apartment loomed ahead, nondescript, blending into the row of identical buildings, the kind of place you walk past without a second thought. Yet today, it was the center of years of obsession, the focal point of an investigation that had spanned a decade. Inside the surveillance van, Reynolds' team monitored live feeds. The suspect emerged from the building, coffee in hand, unaware that cameras followed his every movement. The officers held their positions, tense, poised to strike. The hours of preparation had led to this moment, every detail accounted for, every contingency planned, yet the air was heavy with the possibility of error. Reynolds' fingers drummed lightly on the console, his mind racing through scenarios, timing every step, calculating every outcome. The operation was precise, surgical in its execution, yet the human element, the unpredictability of fear, panic, or instinct, loomed like a shadow over the entire plan. The suspect walked down the street, nodding casually at neighbors who waved. To them, he was just another man on his morning routine, nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. But in the eyes of law enforcement, he was the culmination of years of unanswered questions, the embodiment of fear that had lingered in Clearwater since 2010. Every small gesture, every glance, every movement was scrutinized, cataloged, and analyzed in real time. The tension inside the van was palpable, silent but electric, a collective anticipation that vibrated through every officer present. Then came the signal. Reynolds had given the command, subtle, almost imperceptible. Unmarked cars moved into position, blocking escape routes. Officers positioned themselves strategically, every angle covered. The suspect, completely unaware, approached the designated point, the final step in his carefully constructed routine. Reynolds' voice, calm but firm over the radio, gave the order, "Move in." The moment exploded into controlled chaos. Officers closed in, catching the suspect by surprise. Hands were raised, commands shouted, and in the blink of an eye, the man who had evaded justice for 10 years was on the ground, handcuffed, stunned, confused. The operation was over before the adrenaline could fully register. The meticulous planning, the months of surveillance, the years of patient investigation, all condensed into this singular, decisive moment. Inside the apartment, officers swept through, documenting, collecting, photographing. Every surface, every object, every trace of presence was scrutinized. In a closet, behind a stack of cardboard boxes, they found a small, locked chest. Inside were notebooks, cryptic sketches, photographs, some from local parks, some from Jessica's neighborhood, carefully cataloged, annotated with dates and notes. Each page revealed an obsessive attention to detail, a mind consumed by control, secrecy, and fixation. Reynolds leafed through the notebooks, a cold, sinking realizations settling over him. This was more than a single act of violence. This was years of premeditation, a pattern of behavior that had gone unnoticed, unnoticed by neighbors, unnoticed by friends, unnoticed by the world. Meanwhile, back in Clearwater, news of the arrest spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with reactions: relief, disbelief, outrage, and lingering fear. Local news outlets ran rolling updates, their anchors' voices tinged with urgency and astonishment. For a decade, the city had whispered about the unknown assailant, speculated endlessly, and now, the shadow that had haunted their streets had been brought into the light. Residents who had long lived in quiet anxiety felt a mix of vindication and unease, realizing that the monster they had feared was real, methodical, and had lived among them unnoticed. Jessica Harper, watching from a safe distance, felt a tidal wave of emotion. Relief, fear, anticipation, and the faint tremor of trauma intermingled within her. She knew that the confrontation was far from over. The arrest was a milestone, but not closure. That would come only through testimony, through evidence, through the painstaking process of justice. Yet, even this step, the first in 10 years, was monumental. She had waited for this moment, lived through nightmares, and now the nightmare had a face, a name, a tangible presence that could be held accountable. Inside the interrogation room, the suspect sat silently, eyes darting nervously as Detective Reynolds entered. The room was stark, fluorescent lights harsh against the beige walls. Reynolds laid out the evidence methodically: photographs, timestamps, digital records, the notebooks found in the apartment. The man's composure cracked in subtle ways: an involuntary twitch, a stammer, the tightening of fists under the table. For years, he had carefully curated an existence that left no trace, yet now he was confronted with the sum of his meticulous planning. The confrontation was quiet, intense, a psychological clash of patience, fear, and authority. Investigators watched, documenting every reaction, analyzing micro-expressions, noting inconsistencies. The suspect denied involvement at first, claiming ignorance, dismissing the evidence as circumstantial, attempting to project normalcy. But Reynolds, experienced and relentless, guided the conversation with precision. Each denial was countered with proof, each attempt at deflection met with unyielding fact. Slowly, the mask began to crack. The suspect's control, honed over years, was slipping, revealing the tension and fragility beneath the surface. As questioning continued, new revelations emerged. Hidden compartments within the apartment held items linked directly to the 2010 attack: a scarf matching the description given by Jessica, fibers consistent with those found at the scene, a small container with traces of blood matching her DNA. The evidence was irrefutable, a meticulous trail leading directly from him to the crime. Reynolds presented the facts calmly, but with an intensity that made evasion impossible. The suspect's silence spoke volumes, the weight of truth pressing down with inevitability. The community's reaction intensified. News footage showed law enforcement moving in, neighbors craning their necks, whispers of shock and disbelief circulating through local shops, schools, and homes. Parents recounted stories to their children about the fear that had lingered for a decade, now transformed into a complex mix of relief and renewed anxiety. The arrest was a turning point, yet the scars left behind, the fear, the trauma, the questions remained palpable. Jessica's testimony would soon become central. Meeting with prosecutors, reviewing details, recounting events from that night with precision honed over years of reflection and counseling, she prepared herself for the role she had long dreaded. Each word spoken would reinforce the narrative, validate the painstaking work of law enforcement, and cement the link between suspect and crime. The process was daunting, but she faced it with quiet determination, her resolve shaped by years of trauma and survival. Detective Reynolds, exhausted but resolute, continued to oversee the investigation. Every minute, every observation, every detail mattered. The suspect, now in custody, was no longer a phantom, no longer an abstraction. He was tangible, accountable, and every effort would now focus on securing a legal resolution. The delicate dance of evidence, testimony, and procedure would begin, and the cold case that had haunted Clearwater since 2010 was finally moving toward the possibility of closure. Yet, even with the arrest, tension remained. Questions lingered. Were there other victims, other acts unnoticed, other crimes hidden in plain sight? The notebooks hinted at patterns, obsessions, but not all were fully understood. Reynolds recognized the fragility of resolution. Arrest did not erase trauma, did not immediately restore peace, did not undo the fear that had gripped Jessica and the community for a decade. The first day of custody passed with meticulous record-keeping. Investigators cataloged every possession, documented every interaction, prepared for court, and ensured that all protocols were observed. The suspect remained tense, aware of the magnitude of the moment, yet outwardly silent, the weight of accumulated deception pressing on him. Reynolds and his team felt the culmination of years of effort, each moment validating their persistence, patience, and refusal to let the past fade into obscurity. As night fell over Jacksonville, the city seemed to exhale collectively. The arrest was made, the suspect secured, and yet the sense of suspense did not dissipate. It lingered like a shadow, a reminder that while one chapter had closed, the story was far from over. Legal proceedings, testimonies, and the quest for full understanding loomed ahead. The cold case, once a dormant, haunting question, was now alive in ways that demanded attention, scrutiny, and careful navigation. And so the story pressed forward, a decade-long saga now pivoting toward confrontation, accountability, and the intricate, painstaking unraveling of years of secrecy. Clearwater's streets, once silent with fear, now carried whispers of justice, the echoes of a community that had endured, waited, and finally witnessed the first tangible step toward closure. The past and present collided in that arrest, a tension unresolved but palpable, a story far from finished yet moving inexorably toward its next stage, revelation, reckoning, and the long, difficult path to emotional resolution. The interrogation room was silent, but the air was thick with tension, almost suffocating. Detective Reynolds sat across from the suspect, a man who had evaded justice for a decade, whose carefully curated facade had finally been stripped away. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly above, casting harsh shadows across the suspect's face, highlighting the subtle twitch of a jaw, the flicker of eyes darting nervously to corners, as if the walls themselves might reveal secrets he had spent years concealing. Reynolds' voice was calm, measured, each word deliberate, designed to probe, to unsettle, to expose cracks in the armor of a mind long practiced in deception. "You remember Clearwater, April 2010? Reynolds asked, leaning forward slightly, the weight of experience pressing in every syllable. The suspect's gaze wavered, a flicker of recognition crossing his otherwise controlled demeanor. For a brief moment, the room held a suspended heartbeat, a quiet pause where years of evasion met the inevitability of accountability. He shook his head subtly, feigning ignorance, but the tension in his body betrayed him. Every muscle taut, every breath measured, as if the act of denial itself required more energy than he could sustain. Outside, the community waited in anxious anticipation. News channels ran rolling coverage, residents gathered in living rooms, offices, and kitchens, glued to screens, following every development with a mix of fear, hope, and disbelief. For a decade, the question had lingered: who had invaded Jessica Harper's home, shattered her sense of security, and left a mark on the city that could not be ignored? Now, the question had a tangible answer, yet the details remained shrouded in the dense fog of investigation and unfolding legal procedure. Inside the room, Reynolds methodically laid out evidence, piece by piece. Photographs of the broken window, the living room in disarray, the faint smear of blood on the counter, all presented calmly, objectively, yet each carrying the weight of emotional gravity. He placed the notebooks on the table, open to pages filled with meticulous notes, sketches of local streets, diagrams of entry points, dates, and times. The suspect's eyes flickered, the controlled composure wavering, small involuntary reactions betraying the cracks in a mind-long practice in concealment. "Can you explain these?" Reynolds asked, gesturing to a photograph of Jessica, taken surreptitiously months before the attack, carefully annotated with notes on her routine. The suspect's hands tightened under the table, knuckles whitening. For years, he had operated in secrecy, but now every action was exposed, every subtle calculation laid bare. He muttered a denial, a quiet assertion that the items were coincidence, yet his voice lacked conviction. The air was heavy with tension, the psychological weight pressing down, each word a test, each reaction a revelation. Jessica Harper prepared herself to provide testimony, rehearsing in therapy sessions, in private, in preparation for the confrontation that the law required. Each recollection of that night, the sound of the intruder's steps, the cold edge of fear cutting through her spine, the metallic tang of panic, the broken glass under her palms, was revisited and contextualized. The process was harrowing, a balancing act between recounting trauma and maintaining the emotional composure required to navigate the legal and investigative proceedings. Her courage became a focal point, a stabilizing force for both the investigators and the community that had followed the case for 10 years. As the interrogation continued, Reynolds introduced subtle psychological strategies, leveraging knowledge of behavioral patterns to elicit responses. Questions were crafted to provoke memory, to bypass conscious defenses, and to expose inconsistencies. The suspect's body language shifted with each probe, shoulders tensing, lips pressing together, eyes avoiding direct contact. Microexpressions, tiny involuntary gestures, became as significant as spoken words. Reynolds recognized them instantly. Years of experience allowed him to read beneath the surface, to interpret fear, guilt, and the gradual erosion of denial. Meanwhile, forensic experts continued their work on evidence collected from the apartment and the surrounding Jacksonville area. Fibers, residues, and digital traces were analyzed using advanced techniques unavailable during the initial investigation. Each finding reinforced the narrative constructed over years, a deliberate, calculated intrusion, executed with precision, leaving few traces, but leaving behind an indelible psychological imprint on the victim and the community. Every small confirmation, every link, became a step closer to irrefutable accountability. Outside the confines of interrogation, the city buzzed with reaction. Local newspapers ran front-page stories, social media posts went viral, and residents revisited memories long buried in their minds, the late-night whispers, the unexplained sounds, the fear that had hung over neighborhoods like a persistent fog. Conversations that had once been hushed now erupted openly, speculation tempered by the reality of arrest, yet colored by decades of uncertainty and lingering doubt. Clearwater had waited 10 years for this moment, and the collective relief was palpable, yet complicated by the trauma that could not simply vanish with the apprehension of a suspect. Back in the interrogation room, the suspect's defenses began to crumble further. Under relentless, precise questioning, details emerged: small admissions, subtle acknowledgments, traces of narrative that aligned with Jessica's memories and the physical evidence collected over years. Each revelation, though minor, tightened the investigative net, reinforcing the narrative of premeditation, obsession, and control. Reynolds maintained pressure without aggression, understanding that the psychological battle was as critical as physical custody. Jessica's participation became central to building a cohesive case. Through detailed review sessions, she provided clarifications, corrections, and confirmations of observations made during the initial investigation. Her testimony was precise, measured, and grounded in memory, honed by years of reflection and therapy. Each session strengthened the prosecution's case, providing both emotional weight and factual clarity that transformed a decade-old cold case into a narrative of accountability and resolution. The suspect, now increasingly aware of the inevitability of consequence, attempted subtle forms of manipulation, testing the boundaries of interrogation, seeking openings, attempting diversion. Reynolds anticipated each tactic, countering with methodical precision, using both evidence and psychological insight to dismantle defenses. The room became a stage of mental chess, a battle of patience, strategy, and controlled pressure, with the outcome gradually tipping in favor of law enforcement. Investigators continued to uncover overlooked details from the original crime scene. Minute fibers under Jessica's fingernails, subtle scratches on the interior window frame, traces of residue consistent with items found in the suspect's possession, all converged to form a compelling, interconnected picture. The previously cold case now radiated clarity, each link a testament to persistence, the evolution of forensic technology, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Throughout the process, Reynolds remained acutely aware of the broader implications. The arrest and interrogation were not isolated events. They represented the culmination of a decade of fear, uncertainty, and trauma for Jessica, her family, and the community at large. Each decision, each line of questioning, was weighed against the psychological impact, the need for accuracy, and the ultimate goal of securing a conviction that could withstand scrutiny in court. As hours passed, tension remained high, but incremental progress was undeniable. The suspect's increasingly inconsistent statements, combined with corroborated physical evidence and Jessica's detailed recollections, built an unassailable narrative. Reynolds meticulously documented every exchange, knowing that each word could prove critical in the legal proceedings to come. The cold case, once a dormant record in a file, was now a dynamic, unfolding story of justice actively pursued, each revelation reverberating through the lives of those affected. Even as the interrogation drew toward its conclusion for the day, the gravity of the situation lingered. The suspect remained in custody, his careful life of evasion disrupted, yet his legal defense was only beginning. For Reynolds, Jessica, and the Clearwater community, the arrest and interrogation represented a pivotal turning point, a transition from uncertainty to the structured pursuit of accountability. The decades-old questions were finally being answered, but the path to full resolution was still lined with challenges, emotional weight, and the meticulous work of law enforcement and legal teams. In Clearwater, residents continued to follow every update with intense focus. Conversations that had once been whispers now carried the weight of shared experience and communal anticipation. The arrest validated fears, answered questions, and ignited discussions about safety, vigilance, and the lasting impact of unresolved violence. Yet the emotional residue of the decade-long wait remained. Families, neighbors, and friends reflected on the fragility of security, the persistence of trauma, and the enduring need for vigilance even in the wake of legal action. The cold case had evolved from a symbol of fear into a demonstration of methodical, patient pursuit of justice. It illustrated the convergence of technology, investigative expertise, and survivor resilience. Jessica's courage, Detective Reynolds' unwavering persistence, and the tireless work of countless analysts, officers, and experts had transformed what had been a haunting mystery into a story of accountability actively pursued. The narrative had shifted, but the emotional resonance remained, a reminder that resolution, while powerful, carries with it both relief and the weight of memory. As the day ended, Reynolds reviewed the evidence once more, ensuring every detail was documented, every line of questioning captured, every procedural requirement met. The investigation had reached a critical juncture, a tipping point where years of work were finally yielding tangible results. The suspect, in custody and under scrutiny, faced the reality of exposure, consequence, and the long-awaited confrontation with the past he had so carefully concealed. The courthouse loomed over Clearwater like a silent sentinel, its stone steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps, by history, by the weight of justice in all its forms. Jessica Harper arrived early, her hands trembling slightly, a mix of anticipation and residual fear coursing through her veins. She had walked these streets countless times since that night in 2010, every corner, every alleyway a trigger for memory. Now, she was walking toward resolution, toward confrontation with the man who had stolen years of security from her life, yet the weight of that anticipation pressed heavier than any memory she had endured. Inside the courthouse, Detective Reynolds and the legal team worked tirelessly. The case had been meticulously documented, every shred of evidence cataloged, every timeline reconstructed. The notebooks found in Jacksonville, the fibers, the residues, the surveillance footage, Jessica's detailed testimony, all were prepared to present a narrative of meticulous premeditation, a trail so precise it was impossible to dispute. Reynolds knew that the challenge now was not finding the truth, it had already been uncovered, but conveying it in a way that the court could fully grasp, that jurors could understand the depth of obsession, the planning, the psychological imprint left on a victim and a community. The suspect, now officially charged, sat in the holding cell, expression carefully neutral, hands resting in his lap. Years of evasion had honed his composure, yet the courtroom loomed like an arena, exposing him to scrutiny and accountability he had long avoided. His lawyer whispered reassurances, procedural advice, strategies, but the underlying truth was inescapable. The evidence was overwhelming. The narrative constructed by decades of careful investigation was airtight, and the psychological pressure was building to an almost unbearable intensity. As opening statements began, the room was hushed, the air taut with expectation. Reynolds watched Jessica from a distance, noting the subtle flexing of her hands, the controlled breaths she took to steady herself. The prosecutor spoke with measured authority, outlining the decade-long journey from the night of the attack to the arrest in Jacksonville, emphasizing the meticulous planning, the obsessive behaviors, and the undeniable connection between suspect and crime. Each word struck the room with clarity, every fact layered upon the next, forming a narrative impossible to ignore. The suspect's lawyer attempted to minimize, to cast doubt, to frame the events as circumstantial. Yet each argument was met with counter-evidence, fibers, residues, photographs, surveillance timestamps, and Jessica's testimony, reconstructed meticulously to reinforce the narrative. The room became a chessboard of psychological tension, each side maneuvering for control, yet the weight of truth pressed inexorably forward. The decades of fear, uncertainty, and trauma were condensed into these hours of courtroom confrontation. Witnesses were called, one by one. Neighbors recalled minor anomalies from the night of the attack, details they had long dismissed or forgotten. The sound of a car idling too long, a shadow passing a window, footsteps that did not belong. Each recollection, no matter how small, added layers to the narrative, confirming patterns of premeditation, meticulous surveillance, and calculated intrusion. The cumulative effect was palpable. Each story, each memory, each fact converged to form a story of undeniable magnitude. Then came Jessica's testimony. She took the stand with measured composure, recounting every detail with precision honed over years of reflection and counseling. The room fell silent as she described the night of the attack, the sound of the intruder's steps, the cold metal of the door handle, the shock of broken glass under her hands, the metallic scent of fear and blood. Her words were concise yet vivid, painting a picture of terror that left no room for doubt. Jurors leaned forward, absorbing each detail, feeling the weight of the experience, the human reality behind the evidence. Detective Reynolds guided her carefully through the recounting, ensuring every crucial detail emerged without re-traumatizing her. The interplay between factual precision and emotional resonance was delicate. Every word mattered, every pause carried weight, every reaction was recorded and analyzed. Jessica's courage became a focal point, a testament to resilience, her voice a bridge between the cold facts and the human consequences of years-long evasion. Cross-examination tested her composure, probing for inconsistencies, attempting to weaken her credibility. But her memory, meticulously reconstructed, stood firm. Each question was met with measured responses, the confidence built over years of personal and legal preparation, allowing her to navigate the scrutiny with calm determination. The room felt charged, the energy dense with the tension of long-awaited justice, every observer aware that this was the culmination of a decade-long journey through fear, uncertainty, and investigation. During recess, Reynolds reviewed evidence with the legal team, refining strategy, anticipating counterarguments, preparing for the nuances of testimony and presentation. Every minute was crucial. Every detail could tip the scales. The notebooks, fibers, residues, and digital footprints were mapped in an intricate web, each connection reinforcing the narrative, creating an airtight framework of accountability. The case was no longer just about establishing guilt. It was about conveying the depth, the precision, and the obsession of the suspect's actions, ensuring the court understood not just the act, but the psychological imprint left on Jessica and the community. As proceedings continued, expert witnesses detailed the suspect's patterns of behavior, psychological analysis, and the significance of obsessive documentation found in his apartment. Behavioral psychologists described the meticulous planning, the subtle obsession, and the long-term impact of such crimes on victims and communities. The testimony was technical, yet layered with human impact, illustrating the convergence of methodical criminal behavior with emotional trauma, making the narrative impossible to ignore or dismiss. Community reaction remained intense. News outlets broadcast live updates, social media platforms buzzed with discussion, and residents revisited memories long buried. The arrest, the investigation, and now the trial became a collective focal point, a shared experience shaping communal understanding of safety, justice, and the persistence of unresolved trauma. Clearwater was no longer a passive observer. The city was an active participant in the unfolding story of accountability and reckoning. During cross-examination of the suspect, small cracks appeared. Nervous gestures, fleeting eye contact, subtle hesitations, each a micro-expression, a behavioral cue that added weight to the prosecution's narrative. His careful composure, cultivated over years, began to unravel under pressure, each minute reinforcing the meticulous documentation and testimony of evidence previously collected. Reynolds observed silently, noting every detail, understanding the significance of each reaction, each subtle admission, each flicker of acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Jessica continued to process her own reactions. Sitting in the gallery during the suspect's questioning, she felt the tension radiate from the room, her body responding in echoes of fear and anticipation. Yet alongside that fear was empowerment, the realization that she was no longer solely a victim of circumstance, but an active participant in securing justice, guiding truth, and reclaiming the narrative that had been stolen a decade earlier. As the day drew to a close, the cumulative weight of testimony, evidence, and behavioral analysis left little room for doubt. The suspect remained, outwardly controlled but internally strained, the layers of deception gradually peeling away under the precision of law enforcement, the resilience of a survivor, and the relentless scrutiny of justice. Clearwater watched, a community long haunted, now engaged in the slow, careful process of witnessing truth unfold. The cold case, once a dormant file, a source of whispered fear and speculation, had transformed into a live, compelling narrative. The arrest, interrogation, and court proceedings revealed the calculated nature of the suspect, the depth of obsession, and the lasting impact on Jessica and the community. Each revelation, each moment of testimony, each piece of evidence reinforced the story of a crime meticulously planned, a life altered, and a community long waiting for closure. Even as court recessed for the day, the tension lingered. The story was far from over. Each upcoming session promised further revelations, confrontations, and the final weaving together of decades-long threads into a coherent narrative of accountability. Reynolds, Jessica, and the legal team knew that while the arrest had been monumental, the process of full resolution, the ultimate closure, required patience, precision, and the endurance of scrutiny from all sides. The cold case, once shrouded in mystery, terror, and unanswered questions now pulsed with clarity, yet its emotional resonance remained potent. Clearwater had endured, waited, and now stood on the precipice of justice long delayed. The coming days would continue to challenge perceptions, reveal truths, and test resilience, ensuring that the legacy of the 2010 attack would be fully confronted, documented, and remembered, not just as a crime, but as a testament to persistence, courage, and the pursuit of accountability. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as the morning session began, a charged silence that seemed to press on every shoulder, every spine. Detective Reynolds watched from the back, eyes scanning the suspect, the jury, and the room itself, noting the subtle shift in energy as proceedings resumed. The suspect, who had spent years cultivating calm and evasion, now fidgeted slightly, a foot tapping, a hand brushing nervously over the edge of the table. The pressure was mounting, a psychological vice closing steadily, and every micro-expression, every twitch, was catalogued in Reynolds' mind. The prosecutor approached the bench with a thick folder, evidence meticulously organized. Today was the day the narrative of obsession would crystallize for the jury, the moment when years of investigation would be distilled into undeniable proof. Reynolds felt the weight of anticipation ripple through the room as documents were laid out, photographs distributed, and digital evidence queued for presentation. The air was almost electric, charged with a tension that had been building since the arrest, a decade of suspense now boiling into tangible confrontation. Then came the first revelation, a receipt, long overlooked, initially dismissed as irrelevant. But cross-referencing with travel records and timestamps revealed it was purchased mere hours before the 2010 attack. The purchase was mundane, a bottle of solvent, gloves, but the location and timing aligned perfectly with patterns reconstructed from digital surveillance and witness recollections. The jury leaned forward, the subtle gasp of recognition passed unnoticed by the suspect, whose composure began to falter, a bead of sweat tracing a slow path down his temple. Reynolds observed keenly as the suspect's lawyer attempted to counter, framing the items as coincidence, trivial, unlinked to the crime. But the prosecution had prepared meticulously. The evidence formed a chain, a sequence of small, deliberate acts culminating in the attack. The photographs from the apartment, the fibers, the digital timestamps, the annotated notebooks, all pointed to a calculated series of actions, carefully concealed, yet impossible to ignore when combined. The chain was complete, and the suspect's facade began to crack under the weight of undeniable synthesis. Then came the bombshell. During a routine review of the suspect's digital footprint, Reynolds had discovered something unexpected: encrypted messages sent to an unknown recipient weeks before the attack. Decrypting the files revealed chilling content: detailed notes on potential targets, maps of neighborhoods, observations about schedules, and even sketches of doors and windows. The notation was precise, obsessive, revealing not just intent but premeditation and fixation. The revelation was shocking even to seasoned detectives. Here was a concrete link, irrefutable, tying the suspect's planning directly to the night of terror that had haunted Clearwater for 10 years. The courtroom was captivated. The evidence was presented slowly, deliberately, each new piece compounding the psychological pressure on the suspect. The jury absorbed the meticulous patterns, the obsessive documentation, the precision of planning. Reynolds noticed the subtle cracking of the suspect's resolve, the tightening of the jaw, the shifting gaze, the brief flinch when confronted with undeniable facts. The tension was almost tactile, a room saturated with the gravity of years of trauma converging on one moment. Witness testimony added to the impact. A former neighbor recounted odd behaviors noticed long ago but never reported: a car parked outside at odd hours, a figure lingering in hallways, subtle surveillance of passers-by. Alone, these memories were inconsequential, fragments of daily life. Together, however, they revealed patterns consistent with the obsessive, meticulous profile developed by Reynolds and his team. The connections were undeniable, forming a lattice of accountability impossible to refute. Jessica Harper took the stand again, her presence commanding yet controlled. She recounted observations that had long seemed trivial, but were now illuminated by the investigation. The timing of the intruder's visits, specific gestures, sounds in the apartment that had been etched into memory. Her testimony was precise, almost clinical, yet underpinned by raw emotion, a controlled release of years of fear and uncertainty. Each word carried weight, each recollection a brushstroke in a larger, vivid portrait of premeditated intrusion. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to destabilize her narrative, probing for gaps, inconsistencies, even slight variations in memory. Yet Jessica's preparation, supported by counseling and meticulous review, allowed her to navigate the scrutiny with clarity and composure. Reynolds noted the quiet strength in her voice, the unwavering resolve that had carried her through years of trauma, now crystallizing into testimony that was both compelling and undeniable. Then came the unanticipated revelation that shocked even the prosecution, a hidden recording found on a discarded device in Jacksonville, a video snippet the suspect had overlooked. It was brief, poorly lit, but unmistakable, a shadowed figure, entering an apartment resembling Jessica's, movements precise, cautious, yet unmistakably linked to other evidence. The room went silent as the clip played, jurors shifting uneasily, the gravity of the decade-old attack now materialized before their eyes. The suspect's composure faltered visibly, the illusion of control slipping with each second of revelation. Reynolds allowed the moment to settle, letting the evidence speak for itself. The silent weight of accountability filled the room, pressing against the suspect, amplifying the tension that had been building for years. Each observer, each juror, each member of the courtroom felt the tangible convergence of investigation, testimony, and revelation. A decade of unanswered questions now had faces, dates, and movements attached, concrete, undeniable, and deeply unsettling. Community members following live coverage were riveted. Social media exploded with reactions, disbelief, shock, validation, horror. The hidden threads of the decade-old case, once scattered and obscure, were now visible in stark relief. Residents revisited their memories of fear, of whispered concerns, of neighborhood stories long forgotten. The arrest had been monumental, but this revelation, the recording, the meticulous planning, the undeniable connection, transformed the story from distant intrigue into visceral reality. Inside the courtroom, the suspect's demeanor changed. Brief flashes of panic surfaced in his eyes. Fleeting gestures betrayed anxiety. Years of preparation, of calculated control, could not withstand the cumulative weight of evidence, testimony, and now visual proof. Reynolds watched, recognizing the subtle dance between instinctive denial and creeping realization. Each new piece of evidence reinforced the inevitability of accountability. Jessica's own emotions surged. Relief, terror, empowerment, and residual trauma intertwined as she witnessed the suspect confronted with the totality of his actions. For 10 years, she had carried fear in her chest, replaying that night, questioning every sound, every shadow. Now, she watched the arc of justice unfold, tangible and precise, yet tempered by the awareness that trauma cannot vanish with arrest or revelation. Her resilience, cultivated over years, guided her through each moment, a quiet anchor amidst the storm of emotional intensity surrounding the courtroom. Reynolds and the legal team pressed forward, connecting the dots between overlooked evidence, testimony, and physical artifacts. The chain of causality was undeniable. Purchases, sketches, surveillance, fibers, digital messages all converged to form a comprehensive, irrefutable portrait of premeditation and obsession. The cold case, once a dormant nightmare, had been transformed into an active narrative of accountability, exposing years of hidden intent in stark, undeniable detail. As the session drew to a close, the weight of the day settled over the courtroom like a dense fog. The suspect remained, outwardly composed but internally fractured, facing the consequences of actions long concealed. Reynolds knew that this was only a step, significant, monumental, but not the conclusion. The process of justice, the deliberation of jurors, the legal intricacies, and the emotional reverberations for Jessica and the community would continue. Yet the trajectory was clear. A decade-long shadow had finally been exposed, its contours undeniable, its impact profound. Even as the courtroom emptied, the tension lingered. Journalists whispered analysis, neighbors shared reactions, social media threads buzzed with every minute detail. The city of Clearwater, long haunted by uncertainty and fear, now stood witness to a carefully constructed confrontation with truth. The revelation, the hidden evidence, the undeniable patterns of obsessive premeditation had shifted the narrative irrevocably. The past and present collided, forging a path toward eventual closure, yet leaving the lingering weight of trauma, anticipation, and community reflection firmly in place. The morning light streamed through the courthouse windows, pale and cold, yet inside the chamber, tension simmered like a storm about to break. Detective Reynolds sat quietly, observing the suspect, whose calm had been eroding with each new revelation. The man's hands were clenched, jaw tight, eyes darting, trying to maintain the illusion of control. But beneath the surface, every instinct, every memory, every buried secret pressed relentlessly, creating a psychological pressure cooker that had been years in the making. The prosecution resumed with a precision honed over months of preparation. Each exhibit, each photograph, each timestamp was laid out carefully, building the narrative piece by piece. Reynolds watched as the jury absorbed the meticulously constructed story, the arc of premeditation and obsession tracing a path from mundane purchases to cryptic messages to the final act that had shattered Jessica Harper's life in 2010. The room vibrated with silent gravity, the weight of truth, long delayed, hung palpable in the air. Then came the first pivot, a revelation that seemed almost cinematic in its timing. A forensic analyst presented new findings, trace DNA extracted from a previously overlooked fragment of the apartment's threshold, now confirmed to match the suspect beyond reasonable doubt. The room seemed to exhale collectively as the evidence settled on the table, irrefutable, tangible, a physical testament to the suspect's presence that had remained a ghostly question for 10 long years. The suspect's eyes flickered, a subtle but unmistakable tremor, betraying a flicker of panic he could not hide. The prosecutor, sensing the psychological vulnerability, pressed further. "You meticulously planned." The voice cut through the courtroom's stillness. "You observed, you documented, and you executed. And yet, you overlooked the smallest traces, the tiniest details. That oversight is why we are here today." The words hung heavy, precise, echoing the weight of years of evasion collapsing into the present. The suspect's lips pressed into a thin line, hands tightened further on the table. The pretense of control was slipping, replaced by the gravity of accountability he had so long avoided. Jessica Harper's testimony returned to the center stage. She recounted with clarity the moments etched in her memory, the sudden shattering of glass, the intrusion into her sanctuary, the metallic tang of fear. Each word was sharp, precise, calculated not only to convey fact, but to transmit the emotional weight carried for a decade. She did not falter, even as the defense probed, seeking inconsistencies, attempting to fragment her narrative. Her composure, forged through years of therapy and preparation, remained steady, a testament to resilience under extreme scrutiny. The defense countered with subtle tactics, attempting to reframe coincidences, cast doubt on timelines, and question the validity of evidence. Yet the prosecution's narrative was unyielding. Every purchase, every notebook, every digital timestamp, every fiber and trace converged into a single, inescapable truth. The jury, eyes intent, leaned forward, absorbing the intricate lattice of causality and meticulous planning, the web of premeditation that had remained hidden for a decade but was now starkly visible. Then came the shock to the courtroom. A previously undisclosed witness, a former roommate of the suspect, stepped forward. Initially reluctant, they recounted observations from years ago, noting the suspect's obsession with surveillance, his meticulous note-taking, sketches of exits and entrances, and unusual attention to routines in the neighborhood. The revelation amplified the prosecution's narrative, layering new depth to the obsessive planning, connecting dots previously invisible and confirming patterns long suspected but unprovable until now. The suspect's face paled subtly, a ghost of recognition passing through his features. Detective Reynolds noted the shift immediately. The suspect, who had relied on meticulous control, was now confronted with accounts he could not dismiss, evidence he could not evade, and the emotional reality of a survivor speaking with unwavering clarity. Each layer of testimony, each fragment of corroboration, added pressure, eroding the last vestiges of psychological armor. The room's atmosphere thickened, a collective awareness of truth bearing down with palpable force. Jurors whispered quietly among themselves, absorbing the dense accumulation of facts, narratives, and evidence. Social media outside the courthouse lit up with reactions as snippets of the courtroom's proceedings were reported in real time. Residents of Clearwater, who had waited 10 years for even a glimmer of accountability, now witnessed a convergence of decades-long investigation, survivor testimony, and meticulous law enforcement work. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, the collective tension almost tangible, as the narrative moved inexorably toward its climax. As the trial progressed, the psychological tension reached new heights. The suspect's composure began to fracture further. Small twitches, rapid blinking, subtle shifts in posture betrayed growing stress. Reynolds observed with clinical precision, noting the moment when the mind, long conditioned for evasion, finally succumbed to the relentless weight of exposure. Each new piece of evidence, each corroborating testimony, compounded the pressure, eroding defenses built over years of meticulous concealment. Jessica's emotions were equally complex. Relief intermingled with fear, empowerment coexisted with lingering trauma. Sitting in the courtroom, witnessing the culmination of the investigation, she felt the weight of years lift and settle simultaneously. Each acknowledgement of the suspect's actions, each corroboration of her memories, validated her lived experience, transforming fear into actionable reality. Yet the process was emotionally grueling, the intensity of confrontation magnified by the concentrated scrutiny of court procedure. Then, in a moment that would be remembered as a pivot, the prosecution presented a sequence of emails and digital logs previously thought unrelated. The timestamps aligned perfectly with prior movements, purchases, and observations, creating an airtight timeline connecting the suspect to every preparatory action. The meticulous attention to detail in these communications revealed the extent of planning, the depth of obsession, and the cold calculation that had eluded investigators for a decade. The jury's reaction was subtle but unmistakable, the weight of premeditation now fully visible, undeniable, and horrifying in its precision. The defense scrambled to contextualize, to frame, to redirect, but the accumulated evidence was relentless. Every narrative thread reinforced another, each minute detail an unbreakable link in the chain connecting suspect to crime. Reynolds observed, silent but focused, understanding the importance of timing, emotional resonance, and the undeniable weight of corroborated evidence. The courtroom was saturated with psychological pressure, the convergence of law, fact, and trauma creating an almost tangible energy. Jessica's testimony concluded with precision and strength. She spoke directly to the jury, recounting not only the facts of the night, but the emotional toll that had persisted for a decade, sleepless nights, hypervigilance, and the ever-present shadow of fear. Her words resonated, humanizing the evidence, bridging the gap between abstract forensic analysis and lived experience. The suspect's presence, once intimidating, was now diminished under the scrutiny of combined truth, survivor narrative, and law enforcement's methodical precision. Reynolds allowed the courtroom to absorb the impact. He knew the most critical phase was unfolding, not the presentation of evidence, but the psychological unraveling of a man who had relied on secrecy, calculation, and evasion for 10 long years. Each reaction, each flinch, Each pause in speech reflected the internal collapse of a carefully constructed persona. The culmination of patient investigation, survivor resilience, and meticulous preparation had created an unavoidable momentum toward accountability. As the day ended, whispers circulated, observers speculated, and the weight of revelation settled over Clearwater like a fog that could not be lifted. The cold case, once dormant, was now alive in vivid, unrelenting clarity. The suspect faced exposure not only to the law, but to the emotional reality of every act, every plan, every moment of obsessive premeditation that had haunted Jessica and the community for a decade. The courtroom had become a theater of accountability, a space where past and present collided, leaving no room for denial or evasion. Detective Reynolds, Jessica, and the legal team understood the stakes. The days ahead would demand precision, patience, and endurance. The suspect's unraveling had begun, but the process of closure, legal, emotional, and communal, was ongoing. Clearwater's collective breath, held for 10 years, was now measured in hours and moments, each tick of the clock carrying the weight of past fear, present revelation, and the promise of eventual reckoning. The cold case had been transformed. What was once a mystery shrouded in shadow was now a story of relentless pursuit, meticulous analysis, and the unyielding courage of a survivor. Yet, even as courtroom doors closed for the day, the tension lingered, the emotional and psychological resonance remained, and the community braced for the ultimate culmination, the verdict, the reckoning, the conclusion of a story a decade in the making. The courtroom was silent, a tense anticipation thick enough to touch, as the final pieces of evidence were laid bare. Detective Reynolds leaned back slightly, eyes fixed on the suspect, whose mask of composure was now cracking more visibly with each passing minute. The man had relied for 10 years on secrecy, calculation, and invisibility, but now every meticulously hidden act was exposed under the unforgiving glare of scrutiny. His hands trembled subtly, lips pressed tightly together, eyes darting, seeking escape in angles that did not exist. The prosecution presented the final, decisive exhibit, a combination of digital logs, photographs, fibers, and time-stamped purchases, aligned with Jessica Harper's precise testimony, forming an inescapable timeline of premeditation. Each item was a brushstroke in a portrait of obsession, each minute detail a tether to the night that had haunted Clearwater for a decade. The jury's gaze followed meticulously, the weight of evidence sinking deep, undeniable, almost visceral. The room seemed to vibrate with the gravity of a narrative 10 years in the making, now fully realized. Then came the crescendo moment, a reconstructed map of movements, pieced together from GPS data, eyewitness accounts, and digital timestamps, displayed on a large courtroom screen. The suspect's route, his actions, the calculated timing, the stops and deviations, all mapped with chilling precision. The visual narrative left no room for doubt. The patterns revealed were deliberate, obsessive, and horrifying in their clarity. A hushed murmur spread, jurors shifting forward, eyes wide, the tension in the room rising to a palpable peak. The suspect's lawyer attempted last-ditch objections, procedural technicalities, claims of coincidence, but each was met with precise counter-evidence, each meticulously documented detail reinforcing the prosecution's narrative. Reynolds watched the subtle shift in the suspect. The tapping foot slowed, the fingers unclenched slightly, a twitch in the eye betrayed mounting fear. 10 years of evasion, 10 years of hidden planning were now collapsing in slow, inexorable layers of exposure. Jessica Harper took the stand for the final time, her presence commanding yet steady. She recounted, calmly but vividly, the moments that had long haunted her memory, the intruder's movements, the sounds, the fear, the shattered sense of security. Her voice did not tremble. It carried a clarity honed over years of therapy, preparation, and lived experience. Each word anchored the narrative to human reality, transforming abstract evidence into tangible consequence. Reynolds noted the jury's rapt attention. Each word was a bridge connecting data to lived trauma, fact to emotional truth. The defense attempted cross-examination, probing for inconsistencies, gaps, minute discrepancies in recollection. Yet Jessica's testimony remained unshakable, precise, consistent. Her detailed observations aligned perfectly with the physical evidence, reinforcing the prosecution's case and highlighting the obsessive precision of the suspect's actions. Every attempt to destabilize her narrative was met with measured clarity, every challenge reinforcing the inexorability of truth. Then came the final twist, a moment that even Reynolds recognized as pivotal. A newly discovered surveillance clip from a nearby convenience store, overlooked for years, surfaced during review. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable, a figure resembling the suspect, entering and leaving the area minutes before the attack, carrying items later identified as tools used in the intrusion. The alignment of time, behavior, and actions created an airtight corroboration, visually tying the suspect to the night in question with absolute clarity. The room felt electric, the tension almost physically pressing on everyone present. The suspect's composure broke further. His hands shook under the table, a small cough betrayed rising anxiety. His gaze flicked frantically, searching for some avenue of escape that did not exist. Reynolds observed silently, aware that the psychological unraveling was as critical as the evidence itself, the culmination of meticulous investigation, survivor testimony. And forensic diligence was now pressing directly on a man who had evaded justice for a decade. Jurors exchanged quiet glances, absorbing the weight of narrative, evidence, and human testimony converging in real time. Outside, news coverage broadcast every update, social media buzzed. Residents of Clearwater revisited memories long buried, conversations about fear, security, and justice resurfacing with intensity. The arrest years ago had been monumental. Now, the culmination of courtroom revelation created a collective experience of shock, awe, and validation for a community long haunted by uncertainty. The defense's final attempts to cast doubt fell short. Each counterpoint was neutralized by precise timelines, corroborated evidence, or Jessica's unwavering testimony. Reynolds noted the subtle micro-expressions of frustration and desperation on the suspect's face, the rapid blinking, the tight swallowing, the occasional twitch of the fingers, all indicators of mounting psychological pressure. The slow collapse of a carefully maintained persona was on display, visible to all, undeniable in its progression. Then came the jury's retreat. The doors closed behind them, leaving the room tense, silent, almost suffocating. Reynolds, Jessica, the prosecution, and the defense all waited, the minutes stretching, elongated by years of anticipation, fear, and unresolved trauma. The collective pulse of the community outside could almost be felt as residents followed live coverage, anxiously counting minutes, hearts tethered to the process of a decision that had been a decade in the making. Inside, the suspect sat rigidly, hands clasped, eyes fixed on a single point. For 10 years, he had navigated shadows, hidden movements, and obscured traces. Now every decision, every plan, every hidden act had been exposed. The psychological weight pressed down, heavy and relentless, leaving him visibly strained, a man confronting the full consequence of his obsession, calculated meticulously over years, now laid bare for all to see. Jessica Harper, seated in the gallery, felt the convergence of emotion, relief, fear, empowerment, and residual trauma intertwining. Every piece of evidence, every corroboration, every revelation of the suspect's obsessive planning validated her experience. She was no longer merely a victim of circumstance, but a central figure in the pursuit of justice. The decade-long shadow that had haunted her life was now illuminated, every dark corner exposed to scrutiny, every unanswered question addressed with precision. The jury returned. The air was electric, every breath held collectively. Four-person rows, unfolding the paper that would determine the outcome. Every eye followed, every mind suspended, every heartbeat measured against the weight of a decade-long case. Reynolds felt the moment stretch, a culmination of years of investigation, survivor endurance, and methodical preparation now distilled into a single announcement. Guilty, the word rang out, sharp, final, a sonic boom of accountability reverberating through the chamber. The suspect's shoulders slumped subtly, the careful armor of evasion collapsing entirely. His face paled, eyes widening in shock and realization, lips parting slightly, a final, small acknowledgement of truth. The room exhaled collectively. Whispers rippled through observers, a mixture of relief, disbelief, and a profound sense of closure settling over all present. Jessica's shoulders relaxed slightly, tears glimmering in her eyes, yet a controlled composure remained. The weight of years lifted fractionally, replaced by the knowledge that justice, painstakingly pursued, had finally been realized. Reynolds allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction, the culmination of patient investigation, meticulous evidence collection, and unyielding pursuit of truth reaching its apex. Outside the courthouse, Clearwater exhaled collectively. News crews broadcast live, neighbors shared reactions, and social media became a tapestry of relief, shock, and validation. The cold case, once a dormant nightmare, now had a resolved narrative, a conclusion shaped by decades of investigation, survivor resilience, and relentless law enforcement. Yet the emotional echoes persisted. Fear, trauma, and the long shadow of a decade-long ordeal would linger even as justice was declared. The suspect was taken into custody formally, his fate sealed by evidence, testimony, and the patient perseverance of investigators and survivor alike. Reynolds observed silently, understanding that while legal accountability had been achieved, the process of emotional and communal healing would continue long after the courtroom emptied. The case, while legally closed, would echo through Clearwater for years, a reminder of the fragility of security, the necessity of vigilance, and the power of unyielding pursuit of truth. The gavel struck the bench, a sharp, final punctuation that echoed through the courtroom and reverberated far beyond its walls. Outside, the city of Clearwater exhaled collectively, a decade of tension, fear, and uncertainty dissolving into a moment of public reckoning. Detective Reynolds watched as the suspect was led from the courtroom, his posture slumped, shoulders heavy with the undeniable weight of accountability. Years of evasion, manipulation, and obsession now culminated in a simple, devastating acknowledgement: the law had prevailed. Jessica Harper stepped slowly down from the witness stand, every step measured, conscious of the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Relief was present, undeniable, but interwoven with the lingering tendrils of fear that had haunted her life since that night in 2010. The trauma of intrusion, of violation, could not simply be erased by a verdict. Yet for the first time in 10 years, she felt a tangible sense of justice, a concrete validation of her experience, a profound acknowledgement of her suffering transformed into accountability. Reynolds approached her quietly, offering a nod of acknowledgement, not words. In that silent exchange lay years of shared effort, the meticulous investigation, the reconstruction of timelines, the careful gathering of evidence, the patience required to navigate a decade of uncertainty. The partnership between survivor and law enforcement had been unspoken, yet profound, and its culmination now stood undeniable in the form of a courtroom verdict and a subdued but resolute acknowledgement from Jessica herself. The suspect's transfer to custody was executed with clinical precision. Handcuffs, transportation, secure containment, the procedural choreography underscored the finality of the legal response. But beneath the procedural veneer lay a psychological collapse, subtle yet palpable. A decade-long persona, crafted meticulously to evade detection, now lay in fragments, each shard reflecting a truth long denied, each moment in custody a confrontation with accountability, exposure, and consequence. Outside the courthouse, media crews swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones jostled, and voices clamored for soundbites, yet the story transcended mere reporting. Residents of Clearwater gathered in small groups, sharing reactions, validating memories, and collectively processing the finality of events that had loomed over the city for 10 years. Conversations that had once been whispered in fear now carried the weight of relief and reflection. Discussions about safety, trust, and the long-lasting effects of unresolved trauma permeated the streets. News anchors narrated the sequence of revelations, the painstaking accumulation of evidence, the pivotal testimony of Jessica Harper, and the psychological unraveling of the suspect. Viewers nationwide followed with bated breath, captivated by a story that had been dormant for a decade yet unfolded with cinematic precision and emotional intensity. The narrative of obsession, premeditation, and patient pursuit of justice resonated, a case study in persistence, forensic evolution, and human resilience. Reynolds returned to the precinct, reviewing files one last time. The meticulous notebooks, digital logs, fibers, photographs, all now part of a historical record, a blueprint of investigation, and a testament to the unyielding pursuit of truth. Even with the verdict secured, the psychological imprint of the case remained. Every detail, every subtle clue, every minor revelation would serve as a reference for future cold cases, a manual of patience, precision, and dedication. Jessica, meanwhile, began the delicate process of emotional recalibration. Therapy sessions, support groups, and personal reflection guided her through the complex landscape of post-verdict reality. Relief was tangible, yet so was residual trauma, the knowledge that the past could not simply be erased, that memory and fear had left lasting marks. Each session, each reflection, was a reclamation of agency, a gradual reconstruction of self in a world where closure had been delayed but ultimately achieved. The community's response was layered. Celebration and relief coexisted with sobering reflection. Parents spoke of renewed vigilance, neighbors discussed subtle signs previously overlooked, and conversations about urban safety, crime prevention, and psychological impact surged. Clearwater had endured 10 years of uncertainty, and the conclusion of the cold case catalyzed a profound communal awareness, the fragility of safety, the perseverance required to confront unresolved trauma, and the importance of patience, precision, and persistence in the pursuit of justice. In the jail, the suspect faced solitary confinement for the first time since his arrest. The isolation, procedural rigor, and confrontation with undeniable truth created a psychological environment starkly contrasting the decade of evasion he had previously navigated. Small routines, once carefully controlled, were now dictated by law and accountability. Sleep was fitful, thoughts repetitive, memories relentless. The collapse of identity, the exposure of calculated actions, and the inevitability of continued incarceration created a mental landscape as constricted as the physical cell itself. Back in the city, social media and news coverage highlighted both the triumph and the cost of justice. Residents posted reflections, updates, and analyses. Discussions about the human toll of cold cases emerged, and psychologists weighed in on the long-term impact of unresolved trauma on both victims and communities. Clearwater's story became a cautionary tale, a narrative illustrating the intersection of law enforcement diligence, survivor resilience, and the societal importance of confronting fear with patience and rigor. Reynolds reviewed the case files one final time, noting lingering questions, minor discrepancies, and procedural nuances. Even as justice had been served, the pursuit of perfection in documentation, evidence management, and procedural execution remained paramount. Each detail served as both historical record and learning tool, a roadmap for future investigations and cold cases that might otherwise remain unresolved. The detectives' work was never fully complete. Even closure carried the weight of ongoing responsibility. Jessica, emerging from the courthouse later that evening, walked slowly, absorbing the reality that the decade-long shadow had lifted. The streets she once traversed with apprehension now seemed familiar yet transformed, a city both haunted by memory and reclaimed through justice. Conversations with neighbors, friends, and media outlets reflected a collective catharsis. The long-ignored fear had been confronted, accountability had been established, and the community could begin the subtle process of emotional recovery. Reynolds observed quietly, aware that the human dimension of the case extended beyond legal closure. Trauma, community perception, and lingering fear required careful navigation. The detective's satisfaction was tempered by understanding. Justice is not simply the verdict, but the restoration of security, the acknowledgement of suffering, and the painstaking rebuilding of trust in both law and community. The suspect's incarceration became a symbol, a reminder of accountability delayed, but ultimately realized. News coverage continued to document the case's closure, forensic techniques employed, and the emotional narrative of Jessica Harper. Students of criminal psychology, legal experts, and law enforcement analysts dissected the case, highlighting the intricate interplay of patience, evidence, and human resilience that allowed a decade-old cold case to reach resolution. Within Clearwater, small rituals of acknowledgement began to emerge. Memorials, neighborhood meetings, and public discussions addressed lingering fears, the communal impact of unresolved crime, and the significance of survivor courage. The city processed its collective experience, recognizing that the shadow of the 2010 attack had left both visible and invisible marks, yet closure, justice, and acknowledgement provided a framework for healing, reflection, and vigilance. Reynolds returned home late that evening, the day's intensity settling into quiet reflection. The investigation had concluded, but its resonance persisted. Lessons learned, procedures refined, and human endurance reaffirmed. For him, the case represented the convergence of patience, observation, and meticulous attention to detail, a reminder that even the coldest cases could be resolved through relentless dedication. Jessica, in the quiet of her home, reflected on the journey. Relief, sorrow, triumph, and lingering fear intermingled. The verdict was a landmark, yet memory and trauma remained active participants in her life. Each breath, each moment, was a reclaiming of agency, a transformation of fear into empowerment, and a reconstruction of life under the shadow of both past trauma and present justice. The suspect, incarcerated, faced the legal processes that would continue to ensure accountability. Appeals, additional testimony, and procedural follow-ups would define the immediate months, yet the initial verdict set a definitive tone. The narrative of obsession, premeditation, and relentless pursuit of justice had been established, publicly acknowledged, and legally affirmed. In Clearwater, the collective consciousness shifted subtly but profoundly. Neighborhoods re-examined routines, community watch programs strengthened, and conversations about the psychological impacts of unresolved crime proliferated. The city, forever marked by the events of 2010, now embraced a sense of cautious renewal. The shadow of fear had been confronted, the perpetrator held accountable, and the intricate web of trauma and vigilance transformed into a narrative of survival, justice, and communal resilience. The evening descended over Clearwater like a quiet exhale, the streets bathed in amber light, yet the memory of the 2010 attack lingered in every shadow, every corner, every familiar facade. Detective Reynolds walked slowly along the edge of the city. He had patrolled for decades, reflecting on the journey from first report to final verdict. 10 years of unanswered questions, countless hours of investigation, meticulous cross-referencing of evidence, witness interviews, and surveillance data, all now crystallized into a single, undeniable truth. Justice had been served, yet the city still carried the weight of memory. Jessica Harper returned home, the door closing behind her like a protective seal, yet the quiet offered no real reprieve from the residue of trauma. Relief coursed through her veins, mingling with the echo of fear, of sleepless nights, of the intruder's presence that had lingered like a shadow for a decade. She moved through her apartment cautiously, each familiar object a reminder of both terror and survival. Her journey through therapy, self-reflection, and painstaking reconstruction of narrative had led to this moment, yet closure was not a sudden release. It was a gradual settling, a reclamation of agency in the face of irrevocable past violence. News outlets continued to broadcast retrospectives, timelines of the suspect's obsessive planning, digital evidence connecting him to the night of terror, and interviews with Reynolds, the legal team, and behavioral experts. Each segment reinforced the narrative that Clearwater had lived with for 10 years, validating public memory and collective trauma. Social media was alive with commentary, residents sharing their own recollections of fear, anxiety, and caution, now transformed into relief, reflection, and vigilance. The city itself seemed to breathe differently, the decade-long shadow of uncertainty lifting, yet leaving its indelible imprint. In the courthouse, the suspect remained in custody, facing formal incarceration, psychological evaluation, and ongoing legal proceedings for procedural reviews. Yet beyond legal accountability, the psychological reality was stark. A persona meticulously constructed over years had been dismantled completely. The obsessive attention to detail, the careful concealment of intent, the manipulations designed to obscure truth, all lay exposed. Every routine, every habit, every calculated step now became a subject of reflection, a case study in human obsession and the cost of evasion. Reynolds revisited the crime files one last time, methodically logging each piece of evidence, every testimony, every photograph, digital trace, and fiber. The detective understood that even in closure, there was an educational imperative. Future cases would require this precision, this patience, this dogged pursuit of seemingly lost truth. The cold case, once dormant and haunting, now served as a benchmark, a testament to what persistence, attention to detail, and survivor collaboration could achieve, a blueprint for confronting fear long deferred. Jessica, meanwhile, embraced the duality of relief and ongoing vigilance. The verdict had delivered legal justice, yet trauma's imprint lingered. Every creak in the apartment, every unfamiliar shadow, every moment of unexpected sound stirred residual awareness, the human instinct honed by a decade of fear refusing to vanish instantly. Yet she faced these moments with renewed strength, fortified by knowledge that her persistence, her clarity, and her courage had directly contributed to accountability, transforming years of helplessness into tangible resolution. Community rituals of acknowledgement emerged subtly over the following weeks. Small gatherings, neighborhood meetings, and reflective conversations centered not only on relief, but on shared vigilance, lessons learned, and the importance of supporting survivors. The city processed collectively, understanding that trauma did not vanish with verdicts and arrests. It was acknowledged, validated, and then woven into communal resilience. Conversations shifted from whispers of fear to careful discussions of safety, observation, and preparedness, the past shaping a more aware, engaged, and cautious community. Reynolds attended several local forums, offering insight into investigative techniques, cold case procedures, and lessons from the decade-long pursuit. Residents listened with a mix of fascination and respect, understanding that the closure of the Harper case was as much a triumph of methodical persistence as it was a story of survivor courage. The detective reflected quietly on the balance between procedure and empathy, between evidence and humanity, recognizing that law enforcement's work often extended beyond arrest into the realms of psychological recovery, public reassurance, and community cohesion. The suspect, confined and confronted with each day in incarceration, experienced the slow erosion of a carefully constructed reality. A life built on manipulation, planning, and evasion was replaced with structure, accountability, and reflection. Each moment of isolation, each procedure, each psychological evaluation forced him to confront the full weight of his actions. 10 years of hiding, of careful planning, of obsessive documentation had been rendered irrelevant by the patient persistence of law enforcement and the unwavering testimony of his survivor. Jessica, in moments of quiet reflection, wrote in her journal a catalog of emotions, memories, and insights. Her reflections captured fear transformed into empowerment, trauma met with resilience, and uncertainty confronted by patience and methodical truth. She revisited the night of 2010 in writing, observing patterns, reconstructing memory with clarity, acknowledging both the terror and the agency reclaimed through survival and legal vindication. Each written word became a small act of closure, a reclaiming of narrative, a transformation of experience into strength. The city of Clearwater, while forever marked by the attack, began to reclaim ordinary routines with cautious awareness. Streets once avoided were revisited, homes once monitored obsessively were now lived in with renewed confidence. Conversations shifted from anxiety to reflection, acknowledging the fragility of safety, the persistence of fear, and the restorative power of accountability. The case became a point of communal memory, a story of vigilance, resilience, and the ultimate triumph of truth over concealment. Reynolds, returning to his office one final time, glanced at the files that had consumed years of his career. The cold case, now resolved, was a testament to meticulous methodology, the patience required for long-term investigation, and the unwavering focus on connecting seemingly disparate pieces of evidence. Yet he understood that the human element, the survivor's testimony, the emotional stakes, the community's long shadow, was as critical as any forensic analysis. The balance between law, psychology, and empathy had defined the resolution of this case, and its lessons would resonate in every investigation to come. Evening settled fully over the city, casting long shadows across familiar streets. Jessica walked through her neighborhood, feeling both the residual vigilance of past trauma and the subtle empowerment of closure. Each step was a quiet reclamation of space, a deliberate movement through a world once fraught with invisible fear. The city, too, moved with cautious optimism, its residents reflecting, processing, and beginning to integrate a decade of suspense, fear, and anticipation into collective memory. The finality of the case was not a dramatic flourish, but a quiet, enduring reality. The suspect had been held accountable, justice administered, and the narrative of obsession and premeditation conclusively revealed. Yet the echoes persisted in the mind of the survivor, in the fabric of the community, in the procedural memory of law enforcement, and in the cautious vigilance of a city forever changed. Reynolds and Jessica met briefly outside the courthouse, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. No words were necessary. The journey from fear, uncertainty, and trauma to accountability, validation, and tentative peace had been completed. The city, the survivor, the detective, and the community had all borne witness to the culmination of a narrative 10 years in the making. Each had been tested, each had endured, and each had emerged changed, yet stronger, more aware, and more resilient. As the last light faded over Clearwater, the 2010 cold case finally rested in the annals of history. The arrest, the trial, the testimony, the unraveling of obsessive planning, all converged into a single, undeniable story of accountability, perseverance, and the human capacity to confront fear and reclaim narrative. The city slept cautiously but more securely. Jessica Harper faced tomorrow with strength drawn from triumph over adversity. Detective Reynolds reflected on the enduring value of patience, precision, and human resilience. The decade-long shadow had lifted. The cold case, once a lingering, haunting presence, had been transformed into a story of justice, survival, and communal resolution. Yet its memory remained etched in the streets, the hearts, and the minds of those who had waited, endured, and witnessed the slow, inevitable triumph of truth. In the quiet of the night, Clearwater exhaled, the long arc of fear, obsession, and patience finally reaching its conclusion, a city, a survivor, and a detective forever marked, yet forever changed, by the pursuit and eventual attainment of justice.